The Gryffindor common room crackled with laughter and warmth, the fire painting golden shadows across the stone walls. Students lounged in chairs, finished homework, or planned their next prank, but Hermione Granger sat apart near the corner table, her books spread before her. Normally, this was her safe place, where knowledge shielded her from the chaos of school life. But tonight, something gnawed at her, something she could not quite name. Ron Weasley and Harry Potter had just finished a game of wizard chess, Harry predictably losing as Ron leaned back in his chair with a triumphant grin. Hermione forced herself to smile at them, but the unease inside her only grew stronger. She had always believed her friends would be her pillars, but lately, Ron's behavior left her questioning that faith. It had started small. A dismissive comment when she corrected his spell work, a joke whispered to Seamus about her bossiness, and his constant annoyance whenever she pointed out dangers they faced. At first, Hermione excused it as Ron being Ron. But tonight, when she caught him exchanging glances with Lavender Brown and then muttering something under his breath with a laugh, she felt the sting more sharply. She buried herself in advanced transfiguration to ignore it, though her hands trembled slightly. Harry, oblivious, went over his defense against the dark arts notes. Ron leaned in, whispering something to Dean this time, and both boys chuckled while looking in her direction. Hermione's cheeks burned. When bedtime came, she carried her books upstairs. Yet, she could not shake the thought. Was Ron mocking her behind her back? The following days did not ease her mind. At breakfast, she overheard Ron saying something to Neville about how Hermione always had to be right. When she joined them at the table, silence fell, broken only by Harry's attempt to change the subject. Later, in the library, Ron deliberately chose Lavender as his partner for an assignment, ignoring Hermione completely. The worst moment came during potions class. Professor Snape paired her with Ron, who rolled his eyes dramatically and muttered, "Great, another lecture incoming." Though she tried to stay focused, her heart ached when he refused to follow her instructions, causing their potion to nearly explode. Snape sneered at Hermione for not keeping control, and Ron laughed along with the Slytherins. That laugh stuck with her. By the time night fell, Hermione felt her trust unraveling. Harry remained kind and loyal, but Ron's behavior had shifted from teasing to something crueler, something that felt like betrayal. She had always stood by him, defended him, and even saved him more times than she could count. But now, she wondered if Ron had ever truly valued her friendship. In the quiet of the girls' dormitory, Hermione sat by the window, gazing out at the starlit grounds. Her thoughts raced back to their first year, when Ron mocked her before the troll incident. She had forgiven him then, and their friendship had grown. But what if history was repeating itself in a darker way? What if Ron's jealousy and insecurities were twisting into something far worse than petty insults? She did not want to believe it. Yet the evidence mounted each day. His whispers, his laughter at her expense, his willingness to side with others instead of her. These were not the actions of a true friend. Hermione clenched her fists. She could handle teasing, she could handle arguments, but betrayal? That cut deeper than anything else. She had always believed the trio, Harry, Ron, and herself, were unbreakable. But now cracks spread through that bond, and she feared Ron might be the one to shatter it completely. The next morning brought an even greater blow. A parchment note lay on her books when she entered the great hall. Written in Ron's messy scrawl, it read, "Maybe stop acting like you're better than everyone else. People might actually like you more." Hermione's chest tightened. She looked across the table at Ron, who was laughing with Lavender, not sparing her a glance. Harry, noticing her pale expression, leaned in. "You all right, Hermione?" She forced a nod, hiding the note under her sleeve. "I'm fine." But she wasn't fine. She felt betrayed. Not by some stranger or rival, but by someone she trusted more than almost anyone. Ron Weasley had crossed a line, and Hermione knew their friendship would never be the same. For the first time, she began to wonder what her life at Hogwarts would look like without Ron by her side. The thought was painful, but perhaps necessary. If he could so easily mock her, dismiss her, and wound her with careless words, then maybe he had never truly been her friend at all. As she walked out of the hall, the note still hidden in her hand, Hermione's mind sharpened with a resolve she hadn't felt before. She would not let Ron's betrayal define her. She would rise above it. And if Ron Weasley thought she would crumble under his cruelty, he was gravely mistaken. The question that now loomed over her was not whether Ron had betrayed her. She already knew the answer. The real question was what she would do about it. Hermione kept to herself for the next few days, avoiding unnecessary interactions with Ron. She stayed longer in the library, sat closer to Harry during classes, and made excuses to leave the common room early. It was not easy. Gryffindor Tower always felt smaller when she was trying to avoid one of her closest friends. Yet the distance was necessary. Harry noticed, of course. He often gave her concerned looks, asked if she wanted to study together, and tried to bridge the growing gap between her and Ron. But Harry had his own worries with Quidditch and looming exams, so he didn't press too hard. Hermione was grateful for his quiet support, though she knew he didn't fully understand the depth of what was happening. Ron, on the other hand, seemed unbothered by her withdrawal. If anything, he leaned further into his new circle of laughter and whispers. Lavender clung to his side whenever she could, and Dean or Seamus often shared in his jokes. Whenever Hermione passed, she caught fragments, her name, her habits, her voice mimicked in a mocking tone. Each word was a dagger, cutting deeper into her resolve. It wasn't just embarrassment anymore. It was betrayal. The boy who once defended her in front of Malfoy, who stood with her through dangerous adventures, was now tearing her down as if she were nothing more than an annoyance. Hermione poured her energy into her studies, finding solace in parchment and ink. She excelled in her classes, her essays sharper and more thorough than ever. Professors praised her work, but even those victories felt hollow. Success meant little when her supposed best friend turned against her. One evening in the library, while she scribbled notes on ancient runes, Harry joined her quietly. He sat across from her, setting his books down with a soft thud. After a few minutes of silence, he finally spoke. "You're upset with Ron, aren't you?" Hermione's quill froze. She didn't look up. "Why do you say that?" Harry gave her a knowing look. "Because I've known you long enough to tell when something's wrong. And I've seen how you've been avoiding him. He doesn't notice, but I do." She sighed, closing her book. "He's different, Harry. Cruel, even. I don't understand what happened, but it feels like he doesn't want me around anymore." Harry frowned, clearly uncomfortable. Ron can be thoughtless sometimes, but he doesn't mean it. He's just Ron. Hermione shook her head. "No, Harry. This is more than that. I could forgive thoughtlessness. But this is intentional. He's mocking me to others. Writing me notes telling me to change who I am. That isn't thoughtless. That's betrayal." The word hung heavy between them. Harry didn't argue. He only nodded slowly, his jaw tightening as though he wanted to defend Ron, but couldn't find the words. That night, back in the common room, Hermione overheard something that confirmed her fears. Ron was sitting with Lavender, laughing so hard he nearly spilled his pumpkin juice. Seamus leaned in, asking what was so funny. Ron smirked and said loudly enough for half the common room to hear, "It's just Hermione. She acts like she's everyone's mother. Honestly, I don't know how Harry and I have put up with her this long." The laughter that followed was like a slap across her face. Hermione stood frozen by the stairwell, her heart pounding in her ears. Harry shot Ron a sharp look, but Ron only shrugged, clearly enjoying the attention. That was the moment something in Hermione shifted. She would not cry, not here, not in front of them. She turned sharply on her heel and marched up to the girls' dormitory, her steps steady despite the storm inside her chest. Behind the closed curtains of her bed, Hermione let herself feel the full weight of his words. She had sacrificed so much for their friendship, stood by them through dangers most students could never imagine. And Ron reduced her to a joke, a nuisance to be mocked for the amusement of others. It hurt, but it also cleared her mind. Hermione had always believed in loyalty and friendship, but she was no fool. She knew when someone no longer respected her, and she refused to cling to people who treated her as less than she deserved. If Ron wanted to push her away, then so be it. She would not chase after him. The following day, she made her choice clear. At breakfast, she sat with Harry but ignored Ron completely. When he tried to ask her for quill ink and charms, she handed it to him without meeting his eyes and went back to her notes. During group discussions, she volunteered to work with Harry or even Neville, but never Ron. At first, he seemed confused, then annoyed. and finally defiant. He laughed louder with Lavender, teased her more openly, and tried to provoke a reaction. But Hermione kept her composure. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. One evening, as she packed her things in the library, Harry approached her again. "Are you sure you want to let this go on like this?" he asked quietly. Hermione closed her bag. "I didn't choose this, Harry. Ron did. He made his choice when he betrayed our friendship. And now I'm making mine." Harry didn't argue. He simply walked beside her back to the common room, silent but steady in his support. Hermione knew the road ahead would not be easy. Ron was still part of their trio, and Hogwarts was too small for her to avoid him completely. But she also knew one thing for certain. Ron Weasley was no longer her friend. And though the loss cut deep, Hermione would not let it break her. She would rise stronger, smarter, and more determined than ever before. What she did not yet realize was that Ron's betrayal was only the beginning. Greater challenges loomed, ones that would test not only her friendships, but also her very place in the wizarding world. The weeks rolled on, and the change in Hermione's demeanor did not go unnoticed by the rest of Gryffindor. She was still the brightest student in every class, still punctual, still precise in everything she did. But she no longer laughed in the common room, no longer joined Ron in light-hearted banter, no longer sat at his side in the great hall. Instead, she carried herself with an air of quiet distance, a determination that made her seem untouchable. Ron did not take it well. What began as mockery soon transformed into open frustration. He accused her of being cold, of thinking she was better than everyone else. His words, sharp and careless, carried through the corridors, but Hermione refused to rise to them. To her, silence was a shield, and she wielded it with more power than Ron ever realized. Harry found himself caught in the middle. He tried to keep peace between them, tried to remind Ron of everything Hermione had done for them, but Ron's pride refused to bend. Instead, Ron complained bitterly about being left out whenever Harry sided with Hermione, creating a wedge in their trio that grew with each passing day. One rainy evening, as the castle groaned under the weight of the storm, Hermione sat in the library with her books. The sound of rain against the windows was soothing, a backdrop to her studies. She had nearly finished annotating an arithmancy chart when footsteps approached. Looking up, she expected to see Harry. Instead, it was Ginny Weasley. Ginny slid into the chair across from her, eyes narrowed. "What's going on with you and Ron?" Hermione bristled. "That's between Ron and me." Ginny folded her arms. "He's my brother, Hermione. I've seen how he talks about you lately, and it isn't right. But I also know you. If you're this upset, then he must have done something more than just a few jokes." Hermione hesitated. For a moment, she wanted to tell Ginny everything. The note, the public mockery, the way Ron had twisted their friendship into something ugly. But she stopped herself. Ginny was loyal to her family, and whatever Ron's faults, he was still her brother. "It's complicated," Hermione said finally. Ginny studied her, then sighed. "Well, complicated or not, don't let him drag you down. You've always been stronger than Ron gives you credit for." Hermione blinked, surprised by the support. Ginny gave her a small smile before leaving, her fiery hair disappearing between the shelves. For the first time in weeks, Hermione felt a flicker of hope that maybe not everyone had turned against her. But hope was fleeting. The very next day, during care of magical creatures, Ron made a remark loud enough for half the class to hear. Honestly, Hermione acts like she's Hagrid's assistant. Next thing you know, she'll be grading his lessons. Laughter rippled through the group, and though Hagrid looked confused, Hermione felt the familiar sting. She kept her face carefully neutral, though inside, her anger burned hotter than ever. Harry shot Ron a glare, but Ron only smirked as if proud of his cruelty. It was then Hermione realized Ron wasn't just teasing anymore. He was deliberately undermining her, turning others against her. That night, she lay awake in her bed, staring at the canopy. Her mind replayed every slight, every whispered comment, every mocking laugh. She had hoped Ron's behavior would pass, that he would come to his senses. But instead, it had escalated. And Hermione knew she could no longer simply ignore it. If Ron wanted a war of words, he would find her ready. The next morning, in Transfiguration, when Professor McGonagall asked a particularly difficult question, Ron scoffed under his breath. "Bet Hermione's dying to show off again." Hermione raised her hand immediately. Professor, the answer lies in the interplay between elemental transfigurations and conjuration. Specifically, the ability to alter not just form but inherent magical composition. McGonagall beamed. Precisely, Miss Granger. 5 points to Gryffindor. Hermione turned her gaze on Ron, her voice calm but cutting. Funny, isn't it? For someone who mocks me so much, you never seem to know the answers yourself. A hush fell over the class. Ron's ears turned scarlet, and for once, he had no clever retort. Harry shifted uncomfortably beside him, but Hermione didn't care. She had held her tongue long enough. From that day forward, Hermione stopped shielding herself from Ron's cruelty. Instead, she met it head-on. When he mocked her in the common room, she reminded him of the times he had failed his exams. When he teased her for being bossy, she pointed out his inability to handle responsibilities without help. Every jab he threw, she countered with truth, sharp and undeniable. Some students began to notice. Whispers spread that Hermione was no longer the quiet, studious girl content to sit in the background of Ron's jokes. She was standing tall, unyielding, and Ron was the one looking smaller with each exchange. Harry, though conflicted, couldn't deny the shift. Hermione was winning this silent battle, not through cruelty, but through strength. And while he longed for the trio to be whole again, he also knew Ron had pushed Hermione too far. One evening, as the fire crackled in the common room, Hermione sat with Harry, quietly reading. Ron stormed in, clearly frustrated from Quidditch practice, and muttered something about know-it-alls who think they're perfect. Hermione closed her book and looked him in the eye. I'd rather be a know-it-all than someone who betrays his friends. The words hit Ron like a curse. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The common room went silent, every eye watching. Hermione stood, gathering her books with calm precision. Good night, Harry, she said softly, and without sparing Ron another glance, she climbed the stairs to her dormitory. Ron sat frozen, his face pale, his pride wounded in front of everyone. And for the first time, he realized Hermione was no longer someone he could laugh at. She was someone he had underestimated and lost. What none of them knew was that this rift would soon be tested by dangers far greater than words and pride. For betrayal, once born, has a way of growing. The fallout from Hermione's sharp words spread quickly through Gryffindor. By the next morning, whispers filled the great hall. Students nudged one another, glancing at Hermione with newfound respect and at Ron with barely disguised amusement. The girl who had always been seen as bossy or bookish had turned the tables, exposing Ron's cruelty in front of their house. Ron sat stiffly at breakfast, stabbing his eggs with unnecessary force. Lavender tried to comfort him, but her giggles only added to the humiliation. Across the table, Hermione calmly buttered her toast, her posture composed, her expression serene. She acted as though nothing unusual had happened, but deep inside, a quiet fire burned. For the first time, she felt in control of the situation. Harry sat between them, caught in the crossfire of silence. He wanted to speak, to mend what was broken, but every time he looked at Hermione's steady expression or Ron's stormy glare, the words caught in his throat. Classes that week felt different. Ron grew sulkier, his jabs fewer but sharper when they came. Hermione, however, did not retreat. If he insulted her, she countered with facts he could not deny. If he rolled his eyes, she ignored him and focused on her work. Slowly, students began drifting toward her side, admiring her composure. Even Neville, shy and hesitant, started asking Hermione for help with spells instead of Ron. It was during one of these afternoons in the library that the shift became undeniable. Hermione sat with Harry and Neville, guiding them through a complicated defense against the dark arts essay, when Seamus approached. "You don't mind if I join, do you?" he asked, his usual grin dimmed by unease. "Of course not," Hermione replied, sliding over to make room. As Seamus pulled out his parchment, Hermione caught the flicker of Ron's face across the room. He was watching them, his jaw tight, lavender whispering in his ear. For a fleeting moment, Hermione almost pitied him. But then she remembered the note he had written, the laughter he had shared at her expense, and the pity dissolved into resolve. Later that evening, Harry cornered her by the common room fire. "Hermione, this is getting worse. He's furious with you. And honestly, you're not making it easier." Hermione closed her book, fixing him with a steady gaze. Harry, I'm not going to let Ron belittle me anymore. For years, I've let his comments slide, thinking it was just his way. But there's a difference between teasing and betrayal. He chose to humiliate me, to mock me in front of others. I won't stand by and let him do it again. Harry rubbed the back of his neck. I get that, but if this keeps going, it'll tear us apart. We're supposed to be a team. Hermione's voice softened. I want us to be a team, Harry. I really do. But a team doesn't work if one member keeps cutting down another. Ron has to decide if he values this friendship enough to change. Harry had no answer. He simply nodded, looking tired. The next major incident came during a Quidditch match. Gryffindor was up against Slytherin, and the tension in the stands was electric. Hermione had come to support Harry, though she knew Ron was keeper. As the game dragged on, Slytherin scored twice in quick succession, and Ron's temper frayed. When Harry finally caught the snitch, saving Gryffindor from a crushing defeat, the team celebrated wildly. But Ron didn't celebrate. Instead, he stormed into the locker room, muttering about how no one cared about his mistakes because Harry was always the hero. Hermione, waiting by the stands, overheard Lavender trying to console him. It's just a game, Ron, Lavender said. No, it's not, Ron snapped. It's always the same. Harry gets the glory, Hermione gets praised for being clever, and I'm just, what? The useless one? Well, maybe I don't need either of them. Hermione froze at his words. She had known he was jealous, but to hear him admit it so openly was like a slap in the face. That night, she confronted him in the common room. He sat sulking by the fire, Lavender beside him. You think we see you as useless? Hermione asked quietly. Ron looked up, startled, then scowled. Don't pretend you don't. You're always correcting me, always showing off. Harry's the chosen one, you're the brains, and I'm just the tag-along. I'm sick of it. Hermione's chest tightened. Ron, you've been my friend for years. I've never thought of you as useless. But you've made me feel small, like I'm a burden, when all I've ever done is stand by you. That's betrayal, Ron, not me being clever. The common room fell silent. Lavender's eyes widened, but she said nothing. Harry, standing in the corner, looked stricken. For a long moment, Ron didn't reply. His ears burned red, his fists clenched, but he had no words. Hermione turned away, her voice trembling with controlled anger. If you can't value me for who I am, then perhaps you never were my friend. With that, she walked toward the stairwell, her back straight, leaving Ron staring into the fire, pale and shaken. Upstairs, in the quiet of her dormitory, Hermione let out a shaky breath. Confronting him had been harder than she expected, but necessary. For too long, she had carried the weight of their friendship on her shoulders, forgiving his slights in the hope he would change. But now, she understood. Ron's betrayal wasn't just about cruel words or mocking laughter. It was about his refusal to see her as an equal, to respect her worth. Hermione lay awake, the storm of emotions swirling within her. The trio was fractured, perhaps beyond repair. But even if Ron never came back to her side, she knew one thing for certain. She would no longer let herself be diminished. What she didn't yet realize was how dangerous Ron's bitterness could become. Not just for her, but for all of them. The atmosphere in Gryffindor Tower grew colder with each passing day. Ron's resentment simmered beneath the surface, and though he no longer mocked Hermione as openly, his silence was heavier than words. He avoided her whenever possible, retreating into the company of Lavender and Seamus, as if surrounding himself with laughter could mask the bitterness that gnawed at him. Hermione, for her part, threw herself deeper into her studies. If she could not rely on Ron's support, then she would fortify herself with knowledge and discipline. Yet even as she filled her notebooks and pushed herself to excel, she felt the ache of absence. Their trio had once been a unit, each piece balancing the other. Now there was a void where Ron's friendship used to be, and though she would never admit it aloud, it hurt. Harry suffered the most from the fracture. He tried to spend time with both of them, but their tension followed him like a shadow. In classes, he caught Ron glaring when he sat beside Hermione, and when he joined Ron at meals, he noticed Hermione's quiet retreat from the table. He wanted to shout at them both, force them to reconcile, but deep down he knew this rift was deeper than a single argument. It was rooted in jealousy, pride, and betrayal. Things came to a head one evening in the library. Hermione was working through a complex set of ancient runes when she overheard Ron's voice from behind a nearby shelf. She thinks she's so perfect, doesn't she? Always the smartest, always the one with the answers. I swear, sometimes I think she wishes I'd just disappear. Hermione froze, her hand tightening around her quill. Another voice, Seamus, by the sound of it, replied uneasily. Come on, Ron. She's not that bad. Ron's laugh was sharp. Not that bad. She's insufferable. Maybe if she got knocked down a peg, she'd realize she's not better than the rest of us. Hermione's chest constricted. She rose quietly, her books forgotten, and slipped out of the library before they saw her. His words replayed in her mind, each one striking deeper than the last. Not only did he no longer value her, he wanted to see her fall. That night, Hermione sat by the dormitory window, staring out at the rain. Betrayal had turned to something darker now. Ron was no longer simply pushing her away. He was beginning to wish her harm, if only in words. And though she told herself she was strong, part of her feared what he might do if that bitterness kept festering. The answer came sooner than she expected. 2 days later, Professor McGonagall assigned a paired transfiguration project. Names were drawn at random, and fate dealt Hermione and Ron together. The moment their names were announced, Hermione felt the air thicken around her. Ron's scowl deepened, and several students exchanged nervous glances. They met in the classroom after dinner, silence stretching between them. The assignment was difficult, requiring precision and cooperation to transfigure an object through multiple stages. Hermione tried to keep her tone calm. We need to divide the steps. I'll handle the incantation transitions. You focus on the wand movements. Ron's jaw tightened. Don't tell me what to do. I'm not telling you. I'm suggesting the most efficient way to. Efficient for you, maybe, Ron snapped. You just want to take charge like always. Hermione clenched her teeth, fighting the urge to argue. Ron, this is about passing the assignment, not about control. If you just... Her words were cut off as Ron flicked his wand sharply. The object on the desk, the teacup they were meant to transform, exploded into shards, flying dangerously close to Hermione's face. She recoiled, her heart pounding, as Ron muttered under his breath. That was an accident, he said quickly, though his eyes betrayed no remorse. Hermione stared at him, the truth settling like ice in her veins. Whether it had been an accident or not, Ron's carelessness, fueled by anger, had put her at risk. She gathered her books with trembling hands. I'll do the project myself. You clearly don't care if we succeed, or if I get hurt. Ron didn't stop her as she stormed out, but his glare followed her until the door slammed shut. When Hermione reached the common room, Harry was waiting. He took one look at her pale face and rushed to her side. What happened? She shook her head, unwilling to burden him with the full truth. Just another fight. But Harry, Ron isn't the same anymore. He's letting his anger control him. Harry's expression darkened. Then we'll figure it out. Together. Hermione managed a faint smile, grateful for Harry's loyalty. Yet she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling in her chest. Ron's jealousy had already driven him to betrayal. Now it was driving him to recklessness. And if it continued, she feared it might drive him to something far worse. That night, as she lay awake, Hermione realized a terrible truth. She could no longer simply endure Ron's behavior, or hope he would change. She had to prepare herself for the possibility that he would stand against her. Not just as a friend lost, but as an enemy. The trio was broken, and the fracture was spreading. And in the shadows of Hogwarts, danger was stirring. Danger that would soon test all of them in ways they could never have imagined. The rift between Hermione and Ron had become an unspoken reality at Hogwarts. Students adjusted to it as though it were the new normal. Harry sitting between them in classes, Hermione excelling quietly while Ron grew increasingly restless. But beneath the surface, something more dangerous was brewing. Rumors of dark forces gathering outside the school walls drifted through the corridors. Whispers of Death Eater attacks, of strange disappearances, and of Voldemort's growing power spread from owl posts and hushed conversations among professors. Tension thickened the air, and Hogwarts felt less like a sanctuary and more like a fortress under siege. Hermione sensed the danger keenly. She doubled her efforts in the library, researching protective spells and defensive enchantments late into the night. She and Harry spoke often about what might come, though he rarely admitted how much the weight of prophecy pressed on him. Together, they worked quietly, preparing for a war they knew was approaching. Ron, however, was drifting. His resentment had become something else, an emptiness, a hunger to prove himself. Surrounded by whispers of darkness, he began to listen. The Slytherins, once his rivals, noticed his bitterness. They didn't approach him directly, but their smirks and half-spoken remarks reached his ears. Draco Malfoy in particular took an interest, offering sly encouragement masked as casual conversation. "Must be hard," Draco said one afternoon in the corridor, his voice low and mocking. "Always living in Potter's shadow. Always following Granger's lead. You're the sidekick, Weasley. Everyone knows it." Ron bristled, but the words struck deep. For all his bluster, Draco had named the very insecurities that gnawed at him every night. Instead of brushing them off, Ron found himself wondering, was Draco really wrong? Hermione noticed the shift. She caught Ron lingering near the Slytherin table during meals, listening more than speaking. She noticed the way he glanced at Malfoy during lessons, not with hostility, but with something quieter, more dangerous. One evening in the library, Hermione brought it up to Harry. "Have you seen how Ron's been acting lately?" she asked, her voice hushed. Harry frowned. "You mean sulking? He's been doing that for weeks." "No," Hermione pressed, leaning closer. "It's more than that. He's different. Distracted. And I think Malfoy's encouraging him." Harry blinked. Ron would never side with Malfoy. Hermione hesitated. "I used to believe Ron would never betray me either." The words hung heavy between them. Harry looked troubled, but before he could reply, Madame Pants shushed them, forcing silence. That night, Hermione dreamed of shadows closing in on her, of familiar faces twisted by betrayal. She woke with a start, her heart pounding, and knew the danger wasn't only outside Hogwarts. It was closer than anyone realized. The following week, the first sign appeared. A duel broke out in the courtyard, Seamus and a Slytherin fifth year, wands flashing, curses flying. Hermione and Harry rushed to intervene, but what struck Hermione most was Ron's presence. He didn't step in to help Seamus. He didn't even cheer him on. He stood at the edge, arms crossed, watching with a look Hermione couldn't read. Half frustration, half fascination. When the professors broke it up, Hermione caught Ron's eye. For a moment, she thought she saw guilt flicker across his face. But then he turned sharply away, walking off with Lavender at his side. That evening, Hermione finally confronted him. "Ron," she said firmly, blocking his path in the common room. "I know you've been talking to Malfoy. I've seen the way you've been acting. What's going on with you?" Ron's face darkened. "Oh, so now you're keeping tabs on me?" "Of course you are." Hermione Granger, always needing to control everyone. "I'm not trying to control you," she replied, her voice steady. "I'm worried about you. You've changed. And the way things are right now, we can't afford to let ourselves be divided." Ron laughed bitterly. "Divided? We already are. You made sure of that." Hermione flinched but stood her ground. "No, Ron. You made that choice when you betrayed my trust. And now you're letting Malfoy feed your jealousy. If you keep going down this path, you'll regret it." Ron's eyes blazed. "Maybe I'd rather regret that than spend the rest of my life in your shadow." The words struck her harder than she expected. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other, the gulf between them wider than ever. Then Ron shoved past her, heading up the stairs without another word. Hermione stood frozen, her heart aching with both anger and sorrow. She wanted to scream, to shake him out of his bitterness, but she knew it was useless. Ron was slipping further away, and nothing she said could pull him back unless he chose it himself. Later that night, as she sat by the fire with Harry, Hermione whispered the fear that had been growing inside her. "Harry, I think Ron might become our enemy." Harry didn't answer at first. His eyes were fixed on the flames, his expression grim. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Then we'll have to be ready." Hermione nodded, her chest heavy. The betrayal she once thought was personal now felt like the spark of something much larger. Ron's bitterness was aligning with the darkness rising around them. And she knew that if he crossed that line, there would be no turning back. Ron's restlessness only deepened as the weeks passed. What had begun as lingering near the Slytherins turned into secret meetings in dimly lit corners of the castle. He told himself he wasn't doing anything wrong, that he was just listening, that he deserved to know what Malfoy and his lot whispered about when no Gryffindor was supposed to hear. But in truth, Ron was being drawn in. Draco was clever. He didn't push Ron too hard at first. He let the small comments sink in, let Ron's insecurities do most of the work. Then he began to dangle promises. "You think Potter will ever really see you as his equal?" Draco asked one evening as they loitered near the Ollery. "He's the chosen one, Ron. He'll never let you stand beside him. You'll always be behind him." Ron tried to laugh it off, but the words were poison seeping into old wounds. "I've fought by his side more times than you could count." "Fought beside him, yes," Draco said smoothly. "But when the songs are sung, when the stories are told, who will they remember? The boy who lived, not the boy who stood next to him." Ron didn't answer. He didn't need to. Draco could see the truth in his eyes. Meanwhile, Hermione grew more vigilant. She and Harry spent long evenings in the common room, poring over defensive spells, reviewing Dumbledore's notes on Horcruxes, and preparing for the storm they both knew was coming. But Ron's absence weighed heavily on her. The trio was fractured, and she couldn't shake the sense that something worse was about to happen. One Saturday, as students lounged in the courtyard, Hermione noticed Ron slip away alone. Suspicion pricked her nerves. She followed at a distance, her footsteps soft, until she saw him turn a corner toward the disused classroom on the second floor. She crept closer and peered through the cracked door. Inside, Ron was not alone. Malfoy and 2 other Slytherins stood with him, their voices low but clear enough to catch snatches. "You've got potential, Weasley," Malfoy was saying. "It's wasted where you are. Granger and Potter, they'll never let you shine. With us, you could be more than a shadow." Hermione's stomach twisted. She wanted to burst in, to drag Ron away from them, but she forced herself to stay still. She needed to hear more. Ron shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not saying I'll betray them. I'm tired of being second best." "Not betrayal," Malfoy replied, his tone silky. "Think of it as finding your own path. You don't have to pick a side yet. Just keep your eyes open. The Dark Lord rewards loyalty and courage." Hermione's breath caught at the name. Voldemort. The fact that Ron didn't storm out at once chilled her more than anything. She backed away, heart pounding, and hurried to find Harry. When she told him what she had seen, his face hardened. "He's not just sulking anymore," Harry said grimly. "He's listening to them. Hermione, if Ron starts helping Malfoy—" "I know," she interrupted, her voice breaking. "It could put all of us in danger." But what neither of them said aloud was worse. It could mean the end of their friendship forever. That night, Hermione tried one last time. She waited until the common room emptied and Ron came down the stairs, looking troubled but defiant. "Ron," she said softly, "I saw you. With Malfoy. I know what he's trying to do." His eyes flicked to hers, guilt flashing for a moment before anger took over. "So you're spying on me now?" Typical. Always needing to know everything. "I'm not spying," she said, her voice shaking. "I'm trying to save you. Don't let him use you. You're better than this." Ron clenched his fists. "Better than what? Better than being the third wheel while you and Harry run off saving the world? Better than being a joke to my brothers, to everyone? Maybe Malfoy's right. Maybe I do deserve more." Tears burned Hermione's eyes. "And you think Voldemort will give you that? Ron, he'll destroy you. He'll destroy all of us." Ron's jaw tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might break, that he might see the truth in her words. But then he turned away. "You don't understand. You never have." He left her standing there, her heart splintering with each step he took. When he was gone, Hermione sank into a chair, burying her face in her hands. She had faced trolls, Death Eaters, even the prospect of war. But nothing had ever terrified her as much as losing Ron to the very darkness they were fighting. Upstairs, Ron lay awake, staring at the canopy of his bed. Malfoy's words echoed in his head, mixing with Hermione's plea. 2 paths stretched before him, and for the first time, he truly didn't know which one he would choose. What he didn't realize was that choice would come sooner than he expected. Because Voldemort's shadow was lengthening, and Hogwarts itself would soon feel the weight of his reach. The weeks leading up to Christmas at Hogwarts should have been filled with excitement and cheer, but instead, an oppressive gloom hung over the castle. News of attacks outside the school grew worse by the day. Wizards and witches vanished, entire families fled in fear, and every owl that arrived at breakfast seemed to bring another chilling headline. Even the enchanted decorations in the Great Hall felt dimmer than usual. Hermione had been working tirelessly with Harry, combing through ancient tomes in the library and meeting privately with Dumbledore whenever he summoned them. Their preparations for the battle ahead had intensified, and Hermione poured every ounce of her energy into it. Still, her thoughts always drifted back to Ron. Ron himself was drifting further into dangerous waters. He had not yet openly declared any allegiance, but his late-night disappearances grew more frequent, and when he returned to the common room, his expression was guarded. He spoke less to Hermione and Harry, and when he did, his words carried an edge of bitterness. The trio was no longer whole. There was Harry and Hermione together, and Ron on the outskirts, restless and unpredictable. The breaking point arrived on a frigid December evening. Without warning, the alarm bells rang through the corridors, shrill and urgent. Students leapt from their seats, confusion and fear rippling through the common rooms. A Death Eater attack had breached the castle walls. Everyone to the Great Hall. Professor McGonagall's voice rang out, firm and commanding. Prefects, lead your houses at once. Hermione's heart pounded as she grabbed her wand. Harry was already at her side, his face pale but determined. They were swept into the stream of Gryffindors rushing down the staircases, the air filled with shouts and distant explosions of spells. By the time they reached the entrance hall, the chaos had erupted. Death Eaters in black masks had forced their way in, dueling professors and aurors who had responded to the breach. Spells ricocheted across the hall, painting the air with bursts of red and green. Students screamed, ducking behind statues and pillars. "Stay back!" Hermione shouted at a group of younger Gryffindors, pushing them toward safety. She and Harry dove into the fray, their wands raised, casting shield charms and disarming curses with practiced precision. And then she saw him, Ron. Not hiding, not fighting alongside his housemates, but standing on the fringe of the battle with Draco Malfoy and two masked figures. His wand was out, but it wasn't pointed at the Death Eaters, it was directed toward the professors. Hermione froze, disbelief slamming into her chest like ice. Her mind screamed that it couldn't be true, that Ron would never truly cross that line. But the image before her was undeniable. He was standing with them. "Harry!" she cried, pulling him toward cover behind a toppled bench. She pointed, and Harry's face went white. "No," Harry whispered, his voice breaking. "Not Ron." Before either of them could act, a masked Death Eater spotted them and fired a jet of green light in their direction. Hermione yanked Harry down just in time, the curse searing past their heads. They scrambled back into the fight, every spell they cast fueled by desperation. Hermione's eyes darted back to Ron again and again. He wasn't attacking them, yet, but he wasn't helping either. He cast spells at the aurors, stunning one, tripping another. Each time, her heart cracked further. "Ron!" Hermione screamed across the chaos, her voice raw with desperation. "What are you doing? You're one of us." For a fleeting moment, Ron's eyes locked on hers. The fury she had grown used to was gone, replaced by something else, conflict, anguish, uncertainty. His wand wavered in his hand. "Come back!" she shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You don't have to do this." Draco seized the moment, grabbing Ron's shoulder and pulling him back toward the Death Eaters. "Ignore her, Weasley. You know where you belong." The words seemed to snap Ron out of his hesitation. He pulled his arm free, but instead of returning to Hermione, he raised his wand again. Not at her, but at a member of the Order of the Phoenix locked in combat with another Death Eater. Harry grabbed Hermione's arm. "We can't reach him now. We need to fight." Every instinct in her screamed to run to Ron, to drag him away from Malfoy, but Harry was right. The battle around them raged with deadly force. They turned back to the fight, deflecting curses and protecting the younger students who hadn't made it to safety. At last, reinforcements from the Ministry arrived, and the Death Eaters retreated, dragging their wounded with them. The attackers melted into the night, leaving behind chaos, injuries, and the bitter taste of fear. But Ron was gone with them. As the professors gathered the shaken students and began tending to the wounded, Hermione stood frozen in the center of the hall, staring at the doors where Ron had disappeared. Her wand hung limply at her side, and her chest ached with a hollow grief. Harry came to stand beside her, his face grim. "He left with them," he said quietly, as though speaking it aloud would make it more real. Hermione nodded, her throat too tight to speak. She knew it now, without doubt or denial. Ron had made his choice. He hadn't just betrayed her trust anymore. He had betrayed all of them. But even through her despair, one thought pierced her heart. If Ron had truly chosen Voldemort's side, they hadn't just lost a friend. They had gained a dangerous enemy who knew their every strength and weakness. And that terrified her more than anything. The morning after the attack, Hogwarts was a place of whispers and fear. The castle, usually a refuge of laughter and youthful noise, felt hollow, its walls echoing with the memory of curses and screams. Windows were shattered, scorch marks stained the stone floors, and Madame Pomfrey's hospital wing overflowed with injured students and professors. But for Hermione, the deepest wound was invisible. She sat in the common room, pale from exhaustion, her hands wrapped tightly around a book she hadn't opened in hours. The fire crackled in front of her, but she felt no warmth. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Ron's face lit by flashes of green and red light, his wand raised not for them, but against them. Harry entered quietly, his steps heavy. He looked worse than she had ever seen him, dark circles under his eyes, dirt smudges still on his skin. He carried 2 mugs of tea and set one down beside her. "Any word from Dumbledore?" she asked softly. Harry shook his head. "He's been locked in his office since last night. I think he's trying to figure out what this means." Hermione's throat tightened. "It means Ron's chosen a side." Harry sank into the chair across from her, staring into the fire. "I don't want to believe it. It feels like if we just find him, talk to him, maybe." "No," Hermione interrupted, her voice sharper than she intended. "Harry, I followed him before the attack. I heard him with Malfoy. He knew what he was doing. He didn't stumble into it. He let himself be pulled in." Harry's jaw clenched. "Then he's a traitor." The words tasted bitter, as if speaking them was a betrayal in itself. Hermione lowered her gaze, her hands trembling against the mug. "We can't let our feelings blind us. Ron knows everything about us. Our strengths, our plans, even about the Horcruxes. If he tells Voldemort..." Harry slammed his fist against the arm of his chair. "Then we're doomed." Silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the fire. The weight of Ron's absence pressed on them both, heavier than the attack itself. Later that afternoon, Dumbledore finally summoned them to his office. They climbed the spiral staircase in silence, and when they entered, they found the headmaster more grave than they had ever seen him. His usually twinkling eyes were dulled, his expression heavy with sorrow. "I am truly sorry for what you both witnessed last night," Dumbledore said quietly. "Ronald's actions were troubling." "Troubling?" Harry burst out, unable to contain himself. "He fought with them, Professor. He left with the Death Eaters. He's betrayed us." Dumbledore raised a hand, his voice calm but firm. "Anger will not serve us, Harry. What Ronald has done is indeed grave, but anger will only blind you. We must understand his choices, painful though they may be." Hermione swallowed hard. "Professor, if Ron tells Voldemort what we're doing, about the Horcruxes, then we are in grave danger," Dumbledore finished solemnly. "Yes, Miss Granger, I have considered that. But it is possible Ronald has not yet revealed such secrets. He is conflicted, torn between his bitterness and the loyalty he once held for you both. That conflict may yet protect us, for a time." Harry shook his head in disbelief. "You really think there's hope for him?" Dumbledore sighed, his gaze drifting to the window. "There is always hope, Harry. But hope is not certainty. You must prepare yourselves for the possibility that Ronald is truly lost to us. And if that is so, then you must be ready to face him, not as a friend, but as an enemy." Hermione felt her chest tighten, tears threatening to spill. The idea of raising her wand against Ron was unbearable, yet she knew Dumbledore spoke the truth. The headmaster leaned forward, his eyes suddenly sharp. "The time has come to accelerate your training. Voldemort grows bolder, and the betrayal within our own ranks proves how vulnerable we are. You two must be stronger than you have ever been. Over the following days, Dumbledore pushed them harder than ever before. He taught them advanced defensive spells, wards that required immense concentration, and dueling tactics that demanded speed and precision. Hermione threw herself into the work, her mind clinging to it as a shield against her grief. Harry struggled at first, his anger boiling over in reckless spells, but gradually he began to channel it into focus. Still, Ron's absence was felt at every turn. Hermione caught herself reaching for him during practice, as though he were still at her side. Harry sometimes muttered Ron's name under his breath when calling out spells, the habit of years too deeply ingrained to break in a matter of days. The rest of the school reacted in their own way. Some whispered that Ron had been taken against his will, that he had no choice. Others muttered that he had always been jealous, that betrayal was inevitable. Gryffindor House was divided, their once strong unity shaken by the loss of one of their own. One evening, as Hermione and Harry left the library, they overheard two Ravenclaws whispering. "Did you hear? They say Ron Weasley stunned an Auror during the attack. If that's true, he's a Death Eater now." Hermione's blood boiled, but she didn't correct them. She couldn't. That night, alone in her dormitory, she sat by the window with Crookshanks curled in her lap. She stared out at the moonlit grounds, her heart aching with memories of laughter, arguments, and adventures shared with Ron. She whispered into the quiet, "Why, Ron? Why did you leave us?" There was no answer, only the cold wind rattling against the windowpane. But in the shadows beyond Hogwarts walls, Ron Weasley was already on a path that would lead him further into darkness. And every step he took carried him farther away from the boy she once knew, and closer to the enemy he was becoming. The night Ron left Hogwarts with the Death Eaters replayed in his mind again and again, as if it were a nightmare he couldn't wake from. The sound of Hermione's voice screaming his name haunted him, cutting through the clash of spells. The look in Harry's eyes, shock, betrayal, disbelief, burned into his chest like fire. Yet here he was, walking through a shadowed forest with Draco Malfoy at his side and two masked Death Eaters leading the way. The snow crunched underfoot, the air sharp with winter cold. Ron's hands shook, though he kept them jammed deep in his pockets to hide it. He told himself this wasn't betrayal. Not yet. He hadn't cursed Hermione or Harry, hadn't raised his wand against them directly. He was only exploring, finding where he belonged. That was what Draco had promised him, a place of his own, where he wouldn't be the sidekick, the forgotten one. But the hollow ache in his stomach told him he had crossed a line that could never be undone. They arrived at a safe house hidden deep within the woods, its windows shuttered and a dark mark etched faintly on the doorframe. Inside, the air smelled of damp and smoke. Hooded figures sat around a long table, their faces hidden, their voices low. Ron felt the weight of every stare when Draco pushed him forward. "This is Ronald Weasley," Draco announced smoothly. "He fought alongside us last night. He's seen what Potter and Granger really think of him. He's ready to choose a better path." A few chuckles rose from the group. Ron's ears burned. He wanted to snap at them, to defend himself, but he bit down on his tongue. He couldn't afford to show weakness. A tall Death Eater leaned forward, his mask glinting in the firelight. "Weasley, is it? From the Blood Traitor family. What makes you think you belong here?" Ron's mouth went dry. Every instinct screamed to turn and run, but pride held him in place. "Because I'm done being treated like I don't matter. With you, I'll be more than just Harry Potter's shadow." For a moment, silence followed. Then a harsh laugh echoed. "We'll see." The Death Eaters didn't welcome him, but they didn't cast him out either. That night, Ron lay awake on a hard cot in the corner of the safe house, listening to the whispers of dark plans being made. He told himself he could still go back if he wanted, that this wasn't final. But deep down, he knew he had already taken his first step into a world he could never escape so easily. In the days that followed, Ron was tested. The Death Eaters didn't trust him, and they made it clear. They sent him on errands meant to humiliate him, forced him to practice curses he had never dared speak before, and laughed when he hesitated. "Come now, Weasley," Draco sneered during one such practice. Even Granger could do this without flinching. "Are you weaker than her?" Ron's pride flared, and he forced himself to cast the spell, even as guilt gnawed at him. The curse struck a small creature in a cage, leaving it writhing in pain. Ron turned away, bile rising in his throat, but the Death Eaters applauded. At night, Ron lay awake, haunted by Hermione's face. Her tears. Her voice begging him to come back. He told himself he was doing this for himself, to prove his worth. But the truth was uglier. He had betrayed the only people who had ever truly cared for him. One evening, Draco pulled him aside. "The Dark Lord knows of you now. He's watching. If you stay, if you prove yourself, you could be more than you ever dreamed. Fame, power, respect, all of it. Isn't that what you've always wanted?" Ron didn't answer. The truth was, yes, he had always wanted to be seen, to be valued. But at what cost? When he finally slept that night, he dreamed of the Gryffindor common room, of chess games and laughter by the fire. Hermione leaned close, whispering encouragement as he studied for exams. Harry clapped him on the back after a Quidditch win. The dream felt so real that for a moment, he believed he was home again. But then the fire flickered green, the common room dissolved, and he stood in darkness with masked figures around him. Voldemort's voice echoed, cold and cruel. "Your choice is made, Weasley. Do not disappoint me." Ron woke in a cold sweat, his heart racing. He pressed his face into his hands, whispering to himself, "What have I done?" But morning came, and with it, more demands from the Death Eaters. And Ron, bound by his pride and fear, forced himself to obey. Far away in Hogwarts, Hermione stirred from her own restless sleep. She didn't know where Ron was or what he was enduring, but she felt it deep in her chest. He was slipping further into the darkness. And if she and Harry didn't act soon, they might lose him forever. Snow blanketed the grounds of Hogwarts, muting the world in a cold silence. Yet inside the castle, fear buzzed like a restless storm. The attack before Christmas had shattered the illusion of safety, and Ron's disappearance hung over Gryffindor like a curse. Hermione threw herself into research more than ever, trying to keep her mind from wandering to the image of Ron standing beside Malfoy. The library became her refuge, its endless shelves the only place where she felt she had some control. Harry stayed close, his anger simmering just beneath the surface, often lashing out at anyone who dared whisper Ron's name in his presence. One evening, as parchment and books lay scattered across their table, Harry slammed his fist down hard enough to rattle the ink bottle. "This is useless," he growled. "We're sitting here reading while Ron's out there with them. He knows everything, Hermione. He could tell Voldemort about the Horcruxes any moment." Hermione looked up, her eyes tired but steady. "I don't think he has. Not yet. He's conflicted. I could see it in his eyes. He's not lost completely, Harry. But we can't wait for him to decide. We need to find him." Harry leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his messy hair. "How?" "He left with the Death Eaters. They could be anywhere." Hermione bit her lip, then pulled a worn book closer. "There are tracking charms, complex ones, that can be tied to personal connections. I've been studying them. If we use something Ron left behind, maybe we can trace him." Harry's eyes lit with a spark of hope. "Like what?" Hermione hesitated, then lowered her voice. "The chess piece he gave you in first year. You still have it, don't you?" Harry nodded slowly. "Yeah, I kept it. It's in my trunk." "Then that's what we'll use," Hermione said firmly. "If it works, it should give us a location. But we'll need Dumbledore's help to strengthen the charm. Alone, it won't be powerful enough." For the first time in days, Harry felt a surge of purpose. They weren't just waiting anymore, they were doing something. Meanwhile, Ron was facing his first true test. The Death Eaters had moved him to another hideout, this one deep beneath an abandoned inn on the outskirts of a wizarding village. The air was damp, the stone walls dripping with moisture. He sat at a long table with Draco and 3 other masked figures, as one of them outlined their mission. "There's a sympathizer in the ministry," the Death Eater said in a voice like gravel. "A clerk who passes information to the Order. The Dark Lord wants him silenced. This will be a simple task, but it will show where your loyalties lie, Weasley." Ron's stomach clenched. Silenced. He didn't need to ask what that meant. His hand tightened around his wand, his pulse quickening. Draco smirked beside him. "Don't worry, Weasley. It'll be easy. Just do as you're told, and you'll prove yourself." That night, under the cover of darkness, Ron followed Draco and the others into London. The streets were quiet, the lamps flickering dimly in the cold wind. They approached a narrow brick house, and one of the Death Eaters blasted the lock apart with a curse. Inside, the clerk, a nervous-looking wizard with thinning hair, jumped to his feet in shock. What do you want?" Draco stepped forward, wand raised, but then turned to Ron. "Go on, Weasley. Show us you're not just talk." Ron froze. The man's wide, terrified eyes locked on him, and suddenly all he could see was himself, helpless, cornered, afraid. His wand hand shook violently. "Well?" one of the Death Eaters hissed. "Do it." "I," Ron stammered, sweat dripping down his back. He thought of Hermione's voice, of Harry's trust, of his family. Could he really cross this line? In a desperate move, Ron flicked his wand and shouted, "Stupefy!" The red jet of light struck the clerk, knocking him unconscious, but leaving him alive. The Death Eaters sneered. Pathetic. He was supposed to be finished. Draco smirked coldly. "He'll learn." They left the house in ruins, the clerk alive but stunned. Ron lagged behind, guilt and dread weighing on him. He had failed their test, but a tiny part of him clung to the relief that he hadn't become a murderer, not yet. Back at the hideout, one of the Death Eaters cornered him. "You won't get many more chances, boy. If you're not with us, you're against us. Remember that." Ron collapsed on his cot, shaking. He told himself he had chosen this path for respect, for a chance to matter. But now, staring at the cracked ceiling, he wondered if he had only traded one shadow for another, darker, deadlier, and inescapable. And somewhere far away, Hermione bent over an ancient spellbook, whispering the words of a tracking charm under her breath, her hands steady despite the ache in her chest. She didn't know it yet, but her spell was about to lock onto Ron's presence for the first time. Hermione's hands trembled slightly as she placed the small, worn knight chess piece in the center of the library table. Its edges were chipped, a remnant of the first Christmas Harry had ever truly felt at home at Hogwarts. Harry stood across from her, his face tense but hopeful, while Dumbledore observed from the shadows of the lamplight, his eyes glittering with quiet intensity. Hermione drew her wand and began to chant the incantation she had practiced for days. Each syllable rang with purpose, weaving around the chess piece in glowing threads of silver light. Harry leaned forward, holding his breath, as the magic swirled higher, forming the faint outline of a map. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the chess piece vibrated violently, shooting a golden spark into the parchment Hermione had prepared. Shapes appeared, streets, alleys, a flickering point of red moving slowly across the lines. "That's him," Hermione whispered, her heart pounding. "It has to be." Harry's fists clenched in determination. "Where is it?" Hermione studied the map. "It looks like the outskirts of London. Near an abandoned inn, yes, here." She pointed to the location, the red dot pulsing faintly. Dumbledore finally spoke, his voice low but commanding. "You must be cautious. If the charm has found Ronald, then it is certain others will sense your efforts. The Death Eaters do not take kindly to being watched." Harry turned sharply toward him. "Then we should go now before they move him again." Dumbledore's eyes lingered on the map, unreadable. "I will arrange protection, but you must remember, Ronald is not the boy you once knew. The choices he has made have already changed him. Do not expect him to run back into your arms." Hermione bit her lip, remembering the way Ron had looked at her before leaving. There had been anger, betrayal, but also hesitation, something that made her believe he wasn't entirely lost. That night, under the cover of darkness, Harry and Hermione prepared to leave with Dumbledore. Cloaks drawn tight, they followed him through a series of concealed passageways until they emerged just outside the village marked on the map. The air smelled of damp earth and smoke. The abandoned inn loomed before them, its windows broken, its walls sagging with rot. Shadows flickered across the cracked glass, and Hermione's heart jumped. He was inside. Dumbledore held up a hand, silencing them. "You will not storm in. Watch, wait, and learn. Knowledge is a greater weapon than haste." Inside the inn, Ron sat slumped on his cot, staring at the wall. His mind replayed the moment with the ministry clerk over and over. The fear in the man's eyes, the red flash of his own spell, the disappointed sneer of the Death Eaters. He had not killed, but he had still been part of their mission. The weight of it pressed down on him, making it hard to breathe. Draco entered, tossing him a piece of bread. "You're lucky," Draco drawled, his smirk cruel. "If it were anyone else, they'd already be dead for what you pulled back there." But the Dark Lord sees potential in you. Don't waste it. Ron clenched his fists. I didn't want to kill him. You think that matters? Draco snapped, stepping closer. We're at war, Weasley. Lines are drawn. You either fight with us or you're nothing. Ron glared at him but said nothing. Inwardly, he hated the truth in Draco's words. He had chosen this path, but every step forward seemed to sink him deeper into the shadows. Outside, Hermione's spell suddenly flared hotter in her hand, tugging her toward the building like a magnet. Her eyes widened. Harry, he's there. I can feel it. Harry's jaw tightened. He wanted nothing more than to burst through the door, drag Ron out, and demand answers. But Dumbledore's steady hand on his shoulder kept him still. Patience, the headmaster murmured. Observe. Through a narrow crack in the wood, Hermione caught sight of him. Ron, pale and weary, sitting in silence as Draco berated him. Her throat constricted. This wasn't the Ron she knew. He looked older, broken, as though he had aged years in weeks. Suddenly, the air inside the inn shifted. The torches flickered, and a cold, cruel laugh filled the room. A tall, hooded figure stepped forward from the shadows. Hermione's blood ran cold. Voldemort. Ron jumped to his feet, his face blanching. Even Draco bowed low, fear evident in his movements. My loyal followers, Voldemort's voice hissed, echoing through the chamber. And my newest recruit. His snake-like eyes locked on Ron, who tried to stand tall but felt himself trembling. You hesitated, Voldemort whispered, his voice sharp as a knife. You did not kill when ordered. Ron's throat closed. He wasn't worth it. Stunning him was enough. A silence followed, heavy and suffocating. Voldemort stepped closer, raising a long, pale finger beneath Ron's chin. Defiance. Or mercy. Both are weaknesses. Outside, Harry gripped his wand so tightly his knuckles went white. Every instinct screamed at him to rush in, to save his friend from Voldemort's gaze. Hermione grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with panic. No, she whispered. Not now. If we move, we'll lose everything. But inside, Voldemort smiled faintly. You may yet prove yourself useful. Fear is a powerful tool, Ronald Weasley. In time, you will learn that loyalty is not a choice, it is survival. Ron swallowed hard, unable to look away from the serpent-like eyes piercing his soul. He told himself he had no choice. He told himself he was only buying time. But deep down, he wondered if he was already too far gone. Hermione felt tears sting her eyes as she pulled Harry back from the window. Their worst fears were confirmed. Ron wasn't just lost, he was in Voldemort's grasp. The three of them returned to Hogwarts under the cover of night, cloaked in silence. Neither Harry nor Hermione spoke a word on the journey back. The image of Ron standing in Voldemort's presence haunted them both, twisting like a knife in their chests. Once they were safe inside Dumbledore's office, the headmaster studied them carefully. You have seen the truth, he said softly. Ronald is walking a very dangerous line. Voldemort does not waste time on those he deems useless. If he keeps Ronald alive, it is because he believes the boy can still serve him. Harry's hands curled into fists. Serve him? Ron's not a Death Eater. He's just confused. He couldn't. Hermione placed a hand on Harry's arm. Harry, you saw him. He's changing. Voldemort has his hooks in him already. If Ron doesn't resist soon, he'll be lost to us. Dumbledore leaned forward, his gaze grave. Then we must be prepared for both outcomes. Hope that Ronald can be saved, but accept that he may not want to be. Harry shot to his feet, anger boiling over. I won't give up on him. Not after everything. He's my best mate, Dumbledore. We've been through too much to let him throw his life away now. Hermione's voice trembled as she added, and he was my friend too. But Voldemort won't keep testing him forever. Sooner or later, Ron will be pushed into a choice he can't take back. That same night, Ron was summoned again. The Death Eaters gathered in the abandoned inn, their torches casting jagged shadows across the damp stone walls. Voldemort's presence filled the room with a suffocating chill, every follower bowing low as he spoke. There is an opportunity to demonstrate loyalty, the Dark Lord hissed, his eyes glinting. The Order of the Phoenix is planning a meeting in secret. You, Ronald Weasley, will be part of ensuring they never meet again. Ron's breath caught. The Order? His mind leapt instantly to his parents, to his brothers, to Hermione and Harry. Voldemort's gaze narrowed. Do you hesitate again? Or do you accept your place among us? Ron swallowed hard. I'll do it, he forced out, his voice barely steady. Draco gave him a cruel smile, patting him on the back as though he had just won a prize. See? You're learning. But Ron's insides twisted. He had just promised to betray his own family. The mission was set. Intercept a messenger carrying information about the Order's meeting place. Kill him, destroy the message, and return in triumph. Ron followed Draco and 2 other Death Eaters through the countryside the next evening, his mind in turmoil. Each step felt heavier, each breath harder. He knew what was expected of him. He also knew what it would mean if he refused. Hours later, they cornered the messenger, a wiry wizard with dark hair, on a lonely forest path. The man drew his wand immediately, panic flashing in his eyes. Stay back, Draco sneered. You don't stand a chance. Weasley, go on. Show us what you're made of. Ron's wand shook in his grip. He saw Hermione's face in his mind, heard Harry's voice, remembered the warmth of his family's laughter. The messenger raised his wand, and one of the Death Eaters struck first. A curse sliced through the air, missing narrowly. The man stumbled back, fear plain in his eyes. Ron felt the moment closing in on him, pressing harder and harder. If he acted now, he would prove himself to Voldemort, but he would cross a line he could never uncross. Do it, Draco snapped. Ron's hand trembled. He raised his wand, but at the last second shouted, Protego! A shimmering shield flared between the messenger and the Death Eaters, blocking the killing curse that had been aimed at the man's chest. The Death Eaters froze, stunned by his defiance. Draco's eyes widened. What are you doing? The messenger didn't wait. He spun and disapparated with a crack, vanishing into the night. Ron's stomach dropped. He had just saved an Order member, against Voldemort's command. The Death Eaters turned on him at once, fury blazing in their eyes. Traitor! One of them snarled. Draco grabbed Ron's arm, his voice sharp and low. Are you trying to get yourself killed? Voldemort will hear of this. Ron's pulse thundered in his ears. He had chosen. Not Voldemort, not the Death Eaters. He had chosen Harry, Hermione, and his family, even if it meant his own death. Back at Hogwarts, Hermione jolted awake in her dormitory. The chess piece on her bedside table glowed faintly, the tracking charm reacting again. She scrambled for her wand, whispering another spell, and the map appeared once more. This time, the red dot was flashing rapidly, erratically, as if Ron were running for his life. Hermione's stomach knotted in fear. She knew, without doubt, that Ron had just crossed Voldemort. Ron's lungs burned as he sprinted through the forest, branches clawing at his arms and face. His heart thundered louder than the shouts behind him. Spells crackled through the trees, green and red streaks of light slamming into trunks, sending bark exploding into shards. The Death Eaters were chasing him, hunting him, because he had chosen mercy over murder. Run all you want, Weasley. Draco's voice echoed through the night. You won't get far. Ron stumbled but pushed himself harder, clutching his wand like a lifeline. He had no plan, no safe haven, only the instinct to keep moving. He knew Voldemort would not forgive him. He had broken the unspoken rule. Hesitation was weakness, and weakness was treachery. Back at Hogwarts, Hermione rushed into the Gryffindor common room, map clutched in her hand. The glowing red dot marking Ron's presence darted wildly across the parchment, as if it were pulsing with desperation. Harry, she cried, finding him by the fire. He's in trouble. They're after him. Harry jumped to his feet. Then we're going to him now. Within minutes, both of them were cloaked and running down to the gates, the Marauder's map and Hermione's enchanted parchment guiding their steps. They didn't wait for Dumbledore, didn't stop for help. Ron was alone, and they wouldn't abandon him. Not again. In the forest, Ron ducked behind a fallen log, panting heavily. His ears rang with the sounds of pursuit. He could hear the Death Eaters' footsteps and their cruel laughter as they closed in. This is your last chance, Weasley, one shouted. Come back, and maybe the Dark Lord will spare you. Keep running, and you die tonight. Ron pressed his back against the cold wood, his breath coming in ragged gasps. His mind screamed at him to surrender, to survive, but his heart knew it was already too late. Voldemort would never forgive him. A sudden crack of apparition snapped his head up. Spells exploded around him, the air shimmering with curses. Ron raised his wand, deflecting one, barely dodging another. He shouted back with a stunner, hitting nothing but trees. He was outnumbered, outmatched, but his stubborn defiance refused to yield. Just as a killing curse blazed toward him, a shield charm burst to life in front of him, strong and steady. Expelliarmus! Harry's voice rang out as he and Hermione burst onto the scene. The Death Eater's wand flew from his hand, vanishing into the trees. Hermione flicked her wand, sending another flying backwards into a tangle of brambles. Harry? Hermione! Ron gasped, his voice cracking. Relief and shame warred on his face. Harry didn't waste time. We're getting you out of here. More Death Eaters operated in with sharp cracks surrounding them. Spells lit the night like fireworks, the forest erupting with the clash of red, green, and gold. Harry and Hermione fought back to back, shielding Ron as he scrambled to his feet. Draco stepped forward, his expression twisted with rage. I warned you, Weasley. You've just signed your death sentence. Stay away from him. Hermione shouted, her wand snapping up. A blast of fire surged from her spell, forcing Draco to retreat behind a conjured shield. Harry grabbed Ron's arm. Can you run? Ron nodded weakly. Yeah. I'm sorry. Save it, Harry yelled, deflecting a curse that singed his cloak. Move. The three of them bolted, weaving through the trees as spells exploded around them. Hermione's tracking charm glowed brightly, leading them toward a safe apparition point. Their breaths came in ragged bursts, fear clawing at their heels, but somehow they kept moving. Finally, they stumbled into a clearing, moonlight spilling across the grass. Hermione waved her wand, casting protective wards around them. The Death Eater's shouts grew distant, fading into the forest. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Ron collapsed onto the ground, gasping for breath. Harry dropped beside him, chest heaving, while Hermione stood guard, wand ready. At last, Ron whispered hoarsely, I couldn't do it. I couldn't kill him. Voldemort wanted me to prove myself, and I couldn't. Harry's eyes burned with emotion. Good. That means you're still Ron. That means he hasn't taken you from us. Ron looked away, shame etched in every line of his face. You don't understand. I've already done enough. I followed them. I helped them. I let them believe I was one of them. Hermione knelt beside him, her voice soft but firm. And tonight you made the right choice. That's what matters. It's not too late, Ron. Not yet. Ron swallowed hard, tears glistening in his eyes. You should have left me. I don't deserve. Harry cut him off sharply. Don't you dare say that. We don't leave each other. Not ever. The three of them sat there in the moonlit clearing, battered but alive, their bond tested by betrayal and fear yet holding strong. But Hermione knew this was only the beginning. Voldemort would not let Ron's defiance go unanswered. And next time, they might not be able to save him. By dawn, the trio staggered through the gates of Hogwarts. The wards shimmered faintly as they passed, sealing them once more in the castle's protective embrace. Harry held Ron by the arm, half carrying him, while Hermione kept glancing behind them as if the shadows themselves might leap out. Dumbledore was waiting. His tall figure stood in the courtyard, still and silent, as though he had known the precise moment they would return. His eyes moved over Ron, his torn cloak, the bruises, the hollow expression, and for a moment the headmaster's face softened with pity. Then his voice cut through the cold morning air. Come inside. They followed him up to his office, where the fire was already lit, casting long flickering shapes across the shelves. Fox trilled softly, a sound of calm that seemed at odds with the storm in the room. Dumbledore regarded Ron with quiet gravity. You stand at a crossroads, Ronald. You have walked among the Death Eaters, you have witnessed their cruelty, and you have tasted the shadow of their master's power. Now you must decide where your loyalty lies. Choose carefully, for Voldemort does not forgive. Ron's throat tightened. He wanted to speak, but the weight of his shame choked him. Hermione touched his arm, her eyes urging him to answer. Harry simply stared, as if daring him to prove he was still the Ron he had once known. Finally Ron croaked, I chose wrong. I thought I wasn't enough, that nobody saw me. They promised I could matter, that I could step out of everyone's shadow. But I was blind. I see that now. His fists trembled in his lap. I didn't kill. I couldn't. I swear I couldn't. Dumbledore inclined his head. That choice may have saved not only the life of an innocent man, but your own soul. But understand this, Ronald. By defying Voldemort, you have painted a target upon yourself. He will not rest until you are punished. Hermione shivered. So what do? We can't just hide him here, can we? Dumbledore's expression grew grave. The castle is strong, but not impenetrable. Voldemort will test our defenses again. And now, with Ronald as both his failed recruit and his symbol of defiance, the attack will come sooner. Harry stood sharply. Then let him come. We'll fight. We've fought before. Dumbledore's gaze lingered on Harry with a mix of sorrow and pride. And you will fight again, Harry. But you must also understand that every battle carries a cost. Ron dropped his head into his hands. It's my fault. If I hadn't gone with them, if I hadn't. Harry slammed his fist onto the desk, startling both Ron and Hermione. No, Voldemort is the one at fault. Not you. You made a mistake, but you didn't give in. That's what matters. We'll deal with what comes next together. Hermione added softly, You're not alone, Ron. Not anymore. Dumbledore let the words hang in the air before finally speaking. You three must prepare. Voldemort will strike soon, and he will strike hard. And when he does, the bonds you share will be tested as never before. The meeting ended, but the weight of Dumbledore's warning followed them back to Gryffindor Tower. Ron collapsed into an armchair, staring at the fire with distant eyes. Harry sat opposite him, watching carefully, while Hermione paced the rug, her thoughts racing. At last, Ron whispered, You shouldn't have come for me. You should have let me face them alone. Now he'll come for all of us. Harry leaned forward, his eyes blazing. That's what he's always done, Ron. Come for all of us. That's why we stand together. Hermione stopped pacing, her voice firmer than ever. Then we need to be ready. Not just to defend ourselves, but to defend the castle, the order, everyone. If Voldemort comes, he won't stop at you. He'll try to break Hogwarts itself. A silence fell. For the first time since Ron had left with the Death Eaters, the three of them sat as they once had, side by side, united not by innocence but by scars. Far away, in the cold chambers of his lair, Voldemort's rage seethed. Reports of Ron's betrayal had reached him. His followers quaked under his fury, yet his thin lips curled into a chilling smile. If the Weasley boy believes he can run back to the safety of Hogwarts, he hissed, then Hogwarts shall burn for his cowardice. Let him watch as all he loves crumbles. Then we will see where his loyalty truly lies. And in the flicker of torchlight, the Dark Lord began to plan his next strike. The days that followed were uneasy. Hogwarts still bustled with lessons and laughter, but beneath the surface lay a tension no one could ignore. Whispers of an attack spread quickly after Dumbledore quietly informed the staff of Voldemort's rage. Students noticed the heightened security, the teachers' watchful eyes, and the way Harry, Hermione, and Ron seemed more serious than ever. For Ron, every moment felt like waiting for an axe to fall. He couldn't walk through the corridors without feeling the weight of suspicious stares. Some students whispered behind his back, their voices sharp with accusation. Others avoided him altogether, fearing that even being near him might draw Voldemort's wrath. At meals, Ron kept his head down, pushing food around his plate. Hermione sat beside him faithfully, while Harry shot glares at anyone who dared to mutter. Still, Ron felt the distance growing between himself and the rest of the world. Late one evening, the trio sat together in the common room. The fire crackled low, casting warm light across their tired faces. Hermione had spread books across the table, old tomes on defensive magic and protective enchantments. We need to prepare, she said firmly, flipping through a page covered in runes. If Voldemort attacks, Hogwarts must be ready. We can help strengthen the wards, set traps, teach others to defend themselves. Harry nodded. The DA worked before. We can start it again, bigger this time. Everyone who's willing needs to learn. Ron, slumped in his chair, muttered. And what if they don't want to follow me? What if they can't trust me anymore? Hermione reached for his hand. Then we'll show them they can. Actions matter more than words, Ron. If you fight beside them, they'll see who you really are. Harry added with quiet conviction. You saved that Order member. That means more than they know. You just have to keep proving it. Ron met their eyes, a spark of determination breaking through his despair. Then let's do it. Let's be ready. The next week, secret meetings began again in the room of requirement. Students filed in quietly, old members of Dumbledore's army and new recruits alike. The air hummed with nervous energy, but also with resolve. They practiced shields, disarming charms, and defensive formations under Harry and Hermione's guidance. Ron joined in, throwing himself into every spell, every duel. He fought harder than anyone, desperate to prove himself. Slowly, some of the whispers faded. People began to see not a traitor, but someone who had come back from the edge and was ready to fight for them. Still, nights were the hardest. When the castle slept, Ron lay awake, haunted by Voldemort's voice and the memory of cold serpent eyes boring into his soul. He knew the Dark Lord would not forget. Far away, Voldemort gathered his followers in a circle of firelight. His voice cut through the air like venom. Ronald Weasley believes he is safe within Hogwarts. He believes his betrayal will go unpunished. The Death Eaters bowed their heads, trembling. Voldemort raised his pale hand, a cruel smile curving his lips. We will prove him wrong. We will break him, not with death, but with fear. And when Hogwarts burns, he will know that it was his weakness that doomed them all. Draco stood among the circle, his face pale. He thought of Ron, of the night in the forest when he had defied orders. He should have felt satisfaction at Ron's downfall, but instead, a strange unease gnawed at him. Voldemort's punishment would not stop at Ron. It would consume everyone inside Hogwarts. Back in the castle, Hermione sat alone in the library late into the night, poring over spellbooks. She stumbled across one particularly old text that spoke of a binding charm, magic that could tie someone's loyalty to a chosen cause. Her fingers hovered over the words, her mind torn. Could she use such a spell on Ron? To protect him from temptation? To ensure he would never falter again? She shook her head and shut the book. No, that wasn't the answer. Trust wasn't something you forced. It was something you built. The next morning, Dumbledore called the trio to his office. His face was grave, the twinkle in his eyes dimmed. The storm is coming, he said simply. Voldemort gathers his forces even now. You three must be ready, for when the strike comes, Hogwarts will look to you as much as to me. Harry's heart pounded. What should we do? Dumbledore's gaze swept over each of them in turn. Stay united. Whatever happens, whatever doubts or fears Voldemort tries to plant between you, do not let him divide you again. That is his greatest weapon, turning friend against friend. If you can resist that, you may yet prevail. Ron lowered his eyes, shame burning in his chest. But Hermione reached over, squeezing his shoulder. Harry stood a little taller, determination blazing in his eyes. They left Dumbledore's office together, the weight of the headmaster's warning heavy on their shoulders. And in the distance, beyond the safety of the castle walls, thunder rolled across the horizon. The first signs of Voldemort's looming shadow came quietly, almost unnoticed. At first, it was small things, a chill in the air even when the fires roared in the common rooms, a flicker of movement in the forbidden forest at night, owls refusing to deliver letters. Students whispered that they heard strange voices echoing in the corridors, and some swore they saw hooded figures at the edges of the grounds. The staff tightened patrols. Aurors began appearing in the halls, their presence both reassuring and unnerving. Hogwarts was no longer just a school. It was a fortress preparing for siege. Hermione noticed the change in Ron most of all. Where once he had been heavy with guilt, now he carried himself with a hard resolve. He spent long hours practicing spells, often collapsing into a chair in the common room with his hair damp with sweat. Sometimes his wand hand trembled from overuse, but he refused to stop. Harry pushed just as hard, determined to sharpen every student in the DA into a fighter. Under his lead, the room of requirement rang with the clash of spells, the shimmer of shields, and the rush of students learning to stand against the Dark Lord. But Hermione carried another burden. In her quiet hours, she pored over books not just for spells, but for strategy. She knew Voldemort would not strike blindly. He would test their defenses first. And true to her fear, one night the test came. It began with an ear-splitting scream in the middle of the night. Students poured from their dormitories, panic in their eyes. On the front lawn, near Hagrid's hut, a body lay crumpled, a young Auror sent to guard the grounds. His wand was snapped clean in two, his face frozen in terror. McGonagall and other staff quickly ushered the students inside, but the damage was done. Fear spread like wildfire. If even Aurors could be struck down so easily, how long could Hogwarts truly stand? The trio stood at the window of the common room, staring out at the spot where the body had been. Harry's fists were clenched, Ron's face pale, and Hermione's eyes dark with worry. "They're testing us," Hermione whispered. "They want us to be afraid before the real attack comes." Ron's jaw tightened. "Then we can't let them win. We have to show them we're ready." The next day, Dumbledore himself addressed the school in the Great Hall. His voice carried strength, though sorrow lined his face. "We have lost a brave soul," he said, his eyes sweeping over the sea of anxious faces. "But we will not cower. Fear is Voldemort's weapon, and if we give in to it, we hand him victory before the battle even begins. Here, within these walls, we are united. And united, we are strong." The words steadied many hearts, but Hermione noticed Ron looking away, as though unsure if he truly belonged among the united. Later, as they walked through the courtyard, Ron finally broke his silence. "What if they're right?" he muttered, his voice low. "What if all of this happens because of me? What if Voldemort only wants Hogwarts because I betrayed him?" Harry stopped, turning sharply. "Don't say that. Voldemort doesn't need you as an excuse. He'd come for Hogwarts no matter what. You just gave him a bloody nose when he thought he owned you." Hermione stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "Ron, you are not the cause of this war. You're a part of the fight against it. And you're not alone." Ron looked at both of them, their eyes unwavering. For a moment, the doubt eased. That night, the room of requirement filled again. Students gathered not just to practice, but to hear news. Neville stood up, his voice strong despite the nervousness in his eyes. "They want us to be scared. But I'm done being scared. I'm ready to fight. And I know I'm not the only one." The room erupted in murmurs of agreement. Even the younger students stood taller, clutching their wands with new determination. But far beyond the castle walls, Voldemort watched through the eyes of his spies. His smile was cruel. "Let them prepare," he whispered. "Let them cling to hope. When the time comes, their courage will turn to ash." He raised his wand, and the air shimmered with dark magic. "Send them a message. Let them know the Dark Lord is closer than they think." The next morning, when the students descended for breakfast, they found the sky above the Great Hall filled with a massive dark mark, its green serpent coiling across the enchanted ceiling. Gasps filled the air as fear rippled through every table. The message was clear. Voldemort was coming. The night after the dark mark appeared, the castle was quieter than ever. Students huddled together in groups, speaking in hushed tones, afraid even to whisper Voldemort's name. Professors walked the halls with their wands drawn, while enchanted torches burned brighter, as though the very stones of Hogwarts were straining against the gathering darkness. Harry, Hermione, and Ron barely slept. They remained in the common room long after everyone else had gone to bed, planning and preparing. Hermione spread maps of the castle across the table, marking weak points in the wards that she had discovered through hours of research. "The northern tower is vulnerable," she said, tapping the parchment. "If the Death Eaters want to test our defenses, that's where they'll strike first. The wards are old, and they weren't designed for attacks from the outside." Harry nodded. "Then that's where we'll be. If they come, we'll be ready." Ron, sitting beside them, tightened his grip on his wand. "Let them try. I'm not running again." The words had hardly left his mouth when the castle itself seemed to shudder. A deep, echoing boom rolled through the halls, shaking dust from the ceiling. Screams erupted from distant dormitories as students poured into the corridors. "They're here," Harry said, his heart pounding. The trio raced through the winding halls, joined by members of the DA who had heard the commotion. By the time they reached the northern tower, the air was alive with sparks of magic. Death Eaters in dark robes had broken through the outer barrier and were hurling curses at the walls, their wands blazing with deadly light. "Form up," Harry shouted, just as Professor Flitwick appeared with several Aurors, their wands at the ready. But before the adults could take full control, the DA surged forward. Shields flared, spells crackled through the air, and for the first time, the students of Hogwarts faced Voldemort's army in open battle. Hermione stood at the front, her wand moving with fierce precision. She cast shield after shield, protecting younger students who struggled to keep their footing. "Stay together," she cried. "Cover each other." Ron fought with raw intensity, his face set in grim determination. He disarmed one Death Eater, then blocked a curse aimed at Neville, who shouted a shaky thanks before striking back. Every spell Ron cast seemed to burn away a little more of his doubt. This was where he belonged, fighting beside his friends, not against them. Harry dueled with deadly focus, his spells quick and sharp. He ducked a jet of green light, his stomach twisting at how close it had come. He countered with a blasting charm that sent a masked Death Eater crashing into the wall. The skirmish raged across the tower. Sparks lit the air, screams and shouts echoing off the stone. Despite their fear, the DA held their ground. For every curse the Death Eaters hurled, the students answered with one of their own. Then suddenly, a chilling laugh cut through the chaos. A tall Death Eater stepped forward, his mask gleaming in the torchlight. He raised his wand high and sent a crackling bolt of dark magic straight at Ron. Hermione's scream tore through the air. Without thinking, she hurled herself in front of him, her shield charm erupting just in time. The force of the impact knocked her backward, sending her crashing to the ground. "No!" Ron roared, his face twisting with rage. He charged at the Death Eater, spells flying faster than ever before. He fought like a man possessed, driving his opponent back with raw fury until the masked figure finally crumpled under the weight of his assault. Harry knelt beside Hermione, relief flooding him as she groaned and pushed herself upright. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her face was pale. "Ron, stop, focus." Ron staggered back, chest heaving, his wand still raised. The Death Eater at his feet did not rise again. For a moment, silence fell around them, broken only by the sound of ragged breathing. Then the surviving attackers retreated, vanishing into the night as suddenly as they had come. The battle was over as quickly as it had begun, leaving scorched walls and shaken students in its wake. Professor Flitwick began restoring the wards at once, his face grave. "That was only the beginning," he said, his voice unusually harsh. "If they could break through tonight, they will try again." In the common room later, the DA gathered, bruised but alive. No one spoke for a long time, the weight of what they had just endured pressing down on them. Finally, Neville broke the silence. "We did it. We stood against them. We're not helpless." A murmur of agreement rippled through the group. But Hermione, her arm wrapped in a makeshift bandage, looked at Harry and Ron with worried eyes. "They'll be back," she whispered. "And next time, it won't just be a test. It will be war." Ron swallowed hard, his gaze drifting toward the window where the night still pressed close against the castle walls. For the first time, he wasn't afraid of being tested. He was afraid of what would happen when the true battle finally came. And far beyond the Forbidden Forest, Voldemort smiled in the darkness, satisfied. His enemies had fought well, but he had seen what he needed to see. Hogwarts was preparing for war, but so was he. The castle still bore the scars of the attack. Burn marks blackened the northern tower's stone walls, and the air was heavy with the memory of screams and spellfire. Students whispered about the battle everywhere, some with pride, others with terror. The DA had proven they could fight, but the question on everyone's mind lingered. How long until the next strike? Ron felt the weight of the whispers differently. For once, the looks he received weren't filled with suspicion, but with something else, recognition. People had seen him fight, seen him protect them, seen his fury when Hermione had been struck. Yet despite this, he felt no pride. That night played in his head over and over, the sound of Hermione's cry and the rage that had consumed him. He had nearly lost control, nearly lost her. One evening, as the Gryffindor common room quieted and most students drifted off to bed, Ron sat staring into the fire. His eyes burned with exhaustion, but sleep refused to come. He felt it before it happened, the faintest prickle along the back of his neck, the subtle pull at the edges of his mind. He knew the sensation too well. Voldemort was reaching for him. Ron's hand tightened on the arm of his chair. He tried to push the presence away, tried to think of the warmth of the fire, of Harry and Hermione upstairs, of anything but the cold that seeped into his thoughts. But the voice came anyway, smooth and poisonous. "Brave Ronald," it whispered inside his mind. "How noble you were, standing in the way of my faithful. But do you think they will forgive you so easily? Do you think they will ever forget you belonged to me? Ron gritted his teeth, refusing to answer. Voldemort's laughter echoed in the hollow spaces of his thoughts. You fight for them, but what thanks do you receive? Suspicion, fear, distrust. They cheer when Potter leads them. They trust Granger's cleverness. And you? You are nothing but a shadow trailing behind them. Ron's chest tightened. The words burrowed deep, stirring doubts he fought to keep buried. I could give you power, Ronald. Real power. A place at my side, where no one would dare doubt you. You need only accept what you already know, that you do not belong among them. Shut up, Ron muttered aloud, his fists clenching. The voice hissed with amusement. You cannot hide from me. The more you resist, the sweeter it will be when you fall. I will make you mine again, and this time, no mudblood nor Potter will drag you back. Ron shot to his feet, his chair toppling backward. His breath came fast, sweat dampening his forehead. He didn't realize Hermione had come down the stairs until her hand touched his arm. Ron, she asked softly, her face etched with concern. What's wrong? He spun toward her, his eyes wild. He was in my head, Ron whispered hoarsely. He spoke to me again. He's not done with me. Hermione's heart sank. She guided him back into his chair, her mind already racing. Tell me exactly what he said. Ron shook his head. It doesn't matter. It's the same as before, trying to make me doubt, trying to pull me back. His voice cracked. What if he's right, Hermione? What if he never lets me go? She crouched in front of him, forcing him to meet her eyes. Listen to me. He wants you to believe that. He feeds on your fear and your doubt. That's how he controls people. But you've already broken free once, Ron. That means you can do it again. Harry appeared on the stairs, drawn by the commotion. He looked between them, his face hardening as he pieced it together. He's targeting you because he's afraid of you, Harry said firmly. If you were nothing, he wouldn't waste his time. He knows you turned against him, and that terrifies him. That's your strength, Ron. For a moment, Ron wanted to believe them. But Voldemort's voice still slithered in the back of his mind, promising, tempting, taunting. Later, when they spoke with Dumbledore, the headmaster listened in silence, his fingers steepled. His eyes, though tired, were sharp. This is not unexpected, Dumbledore finally said. Voldemort has long sought to break the will of those who resist him. He will try to isolate you, Ronald, to make you believe you are alone. That is why you must cling to what is real, your friends, your choices, your heart. But what if he gets in again? Ron asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Then you resist him, Dumbledore said, his tone gentle but firm. Not with anger, but with certainty. He cannot control a heart that knows where it belongs. Ron left the office shaken but steadier, Hermione's hand gripping his tightly. He wanted to believe he was strong enough, but a cold truth haunted him. Every time Voldemort reached for him, it was harder to push him away. And deep in the dark, Voldemort smiled. His whisper had taken root. It was only a matter of time before Ronald Weasley's resolve cracked, and when it did, Hogwarts would fall with him. Sleep became dangerous for Ron. Every night, the moment his eyes closed, the darkness filled with whispers. Sometimes Voldemort's voice taunted him. Other times, he saw visions, flashes of Harry falling to a killing curse, Hermione bound in chains, the castle burning. He woke drenched in sweat, his throat raw from silent screams. Hermione noticed first. She sat in the common room one morning, pretending to read while watching Ron across from her. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking slightly as he buttered his toast. He barely touched the food. Harry, sitting beside him, caught the same details and frowned. You're not sleeping, Harry said quietly. Ron shoved his plate away. I can't. Not without him finding me. Hermione leaned in, her voice low. Then we need to protect your mind. A clemency. Harry stiffened at the word. Memories of Snape's harsh lessons, the mental invasions, the failures, it all came rushing back. He opened his mouth to object, but Hermione pressed on. It's the only way. Voldemort is using legilimency to reach you. If you learn to shut him out, he can't use your doubts against you. Ron stared at her, pale and uncertain. I'm not exactly known for keeping my head clear. You can do it, Hermione said firmly. You just need practice. Harry's done it before. Between us, we'll help you. Harry didn't look convinced, but when Ron's haunted expression met his, he nodded. All right, we'll try. That evening, the three of them gathered in an unused classroom. Desks were pushed against the walls, leaving a wide open space in the middle. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the floor. "Clear your mind," Harry instructed, his tone uncertain as he remembered Snape's lessons. "No distractions. No emotions. Just emptiness." Ron gave a shaky laugh. "Right. Easy." He closed his eyes, his shoulders stiff. Harry raised his wand reluctantly. Legilimens. In an instant, Harry was pulled into Ron's thoughts, images flashing too fast to hold. Ron as a little boy, overshadowed by his brothers. Ron standing on the chessboard in first year, shouting at Harry to go on without him. Ron hearing Hermione's laughter echoing through the old ball as she danced with Crumb. Ron kneeling in the forest, Voldemort's cold voice praising his obedience. Harry yanked himself out, gasping. Ron staggered back, panting heavily. "I told you," Ron muttered bitterly. "I can't do it. My head's too full of rubbish." Hermione stepped forward, her eyes shining with determination. "It's not rubbish. It's your life, your memories. You can control them, Ron. It's about focus. We'll keep trying until you can block him out." And they did. Night after night, they returned to the classroom. Harry used legilimency, Ron resisted, Hermione coached. Progress was slow, frustrating. Ron's temper flared more than once, his voice rising in anger before breaking with exhaustion. But bit by bit he improved. One night, after Harry whispered legilimens, he found himself not in a storm of memories but staring at a single wall, thick, solid, unyielding. He pushed, but it held firm. Ron opened his eyes, sweat beading on his brow. "Did it work?" he asked, breathless. Harry managed a grin. "You shoved me out." Hermione clapped her hands together, relief flooding her face. "See, you can do this, Ron. You're stronger than you think." But even as they celebrated, Ron's expression darkened. "He won't stop. He'll keep trying. And if I slip, even once." "You won't," Hermione said quickly, gripping his hand. "Because we won't let you." Still, that night when Ron finally slept, the dreams came again. Only this time they were sharper, crueler. He saw himself standing on the battlements of Hogwarts, wand raised, shouting curses at students wearing DA badges. He saw Hermione lying at his feet, her eyes wide with betrayal. Voldemort's voice slithered through the vision. "This is who you are, Ronald. No clemency can hide the truth. You belong to me." Ron woke with a strangled cry, his chest heaving. He pressed his palms into his eyes, trying to block out the image. For the first time, he wondered if Voldemort was right. Not because he wanted to betray them, but because he feared that deep down, he might not be strong enough to resist when it mattered most. And somewhere in the dark, Voldemort leaned back in satisfaction. The seeds of doubt were taking root. The days that followed were tense for Ron. Though he had made progress with clemency, the visions Voldemort planted each night gnawed at him like a festering wound. He woke with shadows under his eyes, his temper short, his mind restless. At first, Harry and Hermione tried to shield him. They explained away his exhaustion to curious classmates, covered for him when he snapped at people, but it became harder to hide. The DA began to notice. During one training session in the room of requirement, Ron's frustration boiled over. Seamus missed a shield spell, and a jinx grazed Ron's arm. It was nothing more than a sting, but Ron rounded on him, his face twisted in anger. "Are you even trying?" Ron shouted. "Do you think this is a game? Out there, one mistake will get you killed." The room went silent. Seamus froze, wide-eyed, before muttering, "Sorry, mate. Didn't mean." "Sorry won't stop a killing curse." Ron snapped, his voice harsh enough to make even the younger students shrink back. Harry stepped forward quickly, putting a hand on Ron's shoulder. "That's enough," he said firmly. "We're all learning." Ron jerked away from him, his chest heaving. For a moment he looked ready to lash out again, but Hermione caught his arm and tugged him back. "Ron," she whispered urgently, "stop." The tension in the room was thick. Whispers rippled among the students. A few exchanged uneasy glances, and Ron felt the sting of it, distrust, suspicion creeping back like a shadow. Later, in the common room, he slumped into a chair, burying his face in his hands. "I messed it up again," he muttered. "They're going to think I'm dangerous." Harry sat across from him, arms folded. "You're not dangerous. You're tired, you're angry, and Voldemort's in your head. That's what's dangerous." Don't let him win by driving a wedge between us. Hermione knelt beside Ron, her voice gentler. Harry's right. He wants to make you feel isolated, like no one trusts you. But we do. I do. She hesitated before adding, they just need to see the Ron who fought for them, not the one who lets Voldemort's poison spill out. Ron looked up at her, his throat tight. What if I can't stop it, Hermione? What if next time I lose it completely? She held his gaze, her hand resting lightly on his arm. Then we'll be there to bring you back. But her reassurance didn't erase the doubts. The next morning, Ron overheard 2 Ravenclaws whispering in the corridor. Did you see him last night? He nearly hexed Seamus for nothing. He's not stable. What if you know who's still got a hold on him? Their words pierced deeper than any curse. Ron walked faster, his ears burning, but the whispers followed him wherever he went. Even within the DA, cracks were forming. Some students still trusted him, but others hesitated, watching him closely during practice, as if waiting for him to slip. Ron felt every suspicious glance like a blade twisting in his gut. That night, another vision came. He stood in the Great Hall, DA members cowering before him as he raised his wand, Voldemort's voice hissing approval in his ear. When he tried to lower his wand, his arm would not obey. He woke with a shout, his pillow damp with sweat. Unable to stay still, he wandered the castle's dark corridors until he found himself outside the library. To his surprise, Draco Malfoy stepped out from between the shelves, eyes widening when he saw him. Weasley, Draco drawled, though his tone lacked its usual venom. Couldn't sleep either? Ron scowled, ready to snap back, but Draco's expression stopped him. There was no smirk, only weariness. You're not the only one haunted by him, Draco said quietly, glancing around to be sure they were alone. He doesn't leave people alone once he's had his claws in them. Trust me. Ron blinked at him, taken aback. For once, there was no insult, no rivalry. Just a strange, almost reluctant understanding. Why are you telling me this? Ron asked suspiciously. Draco shrugged. Because if you let him win in your head, he's already won in reality. He hesitated before adding. And because I know what it's like to be seen as a traitor. Before Ron could reply, Draco turned and walked away, his robes swishing behind him. Ron stood frozen in the corridor, Draco's words echoing louder than he expected. The next day, when Harry and Hermione found him in the courtyard, Ron looked more thoughtful than broken. I don't know if I can stop the visions, he said slowly. But maybe I don't have to beat him in my head. Maybe I just need to prove, every day, that I won't give in. Hermione smiled faintly. That's all any of us can do. But as the DA gathered again that night, Ron felt the eyes on him, watching, measuring. And in the back of his mind, Voldemort's laughter lingered, cold and patient, waiting for him to falter. The September air grew cooler, but Ron barely noticed. Sleep was a stranger to him now, each night riddled with twisted visions that blurred the line between reality and illusion. Voldemort had grown more cunning, planting not just horrors but false hopes, images designed to deceive. One evening, Ron dreamt he was in the library. Hermione was there, bent over a book, her face pale under the candlelight. Suddenly, Death Eaters burst through the shelves. Ron tried to move, but his feet were rooted. He shouted her name, but no sound left his throat. He watched, powerless, as they dragged her away while she screamed for him. He jolted awake, heart pounding. The vision felt too real, sharper than any before. Sweat clung to his skin as he stumbled out of bed. His mind screamed at him to run to Hermione, to protect her. He tore down the corridor toward the library, ignoring the startled portraits. When he burst through the doors, the room was silent. Empty. Hermione wasn't there, no Death Eaters, nothing. Just shelves upon shelves of books. Ron! He spun around. Hermione had appeared behind him, holding a stack of books, her brow furrowed in confusion. What are you doing here? It's past curfew. Ron's chest heaved as he stared at her, relief flooding through him. He dropped into a chair, shaking. I thought you were, I saw, his words tangled uselessly. Hermione set her books down and crouched beside him, concern softening her features. Another vision? He nodded, unable to speak. Hermione sighed, brushing a stray curl from her face. Ron, you can't keep running after every image he puts in your head. Voldemort wants you to act without thinking. If you do, one day he'll trick you into doing something dangerous. Her words hit harder than he expected. Ron knew she was right, but how could he ignore visions that felt so vivid, so immediate? What if one day they weren't false? The next night, Voldemort pushed further. In Ron's dreams, Harry was under attack, surrounded by masked figures in the Forbidden Forest. He screamed Ron's name as green light flared. Ron woke choking on the echo of that shout. He stumbled out of bed again, heading for the forest, but this time he forced himself to stop at the edge of the castle grounds. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stared at the dark trees. No flashes of light. No sounds of battle. Just silence. Behind him, a voice said quietly, "You stopped yourself." Ron turned to find Dumbledore standing there, his blue eyes grave. The headmaster studied him for a long moment before speaking again. "He is testing you, Ronald. Not merely to torment, but to see whether you can be controlled. Each time you rush to act, you become his pawn." Ron swallowed hard. What if one day it's real? What if I ignore it and someone dies? Dumbledore's expression softened. That is the cruelest weapon he wields, uncertainty. But trust in your friends and trust in your own heart. If you are uncertain, seek counsel before acting. Do not shoulder the burden alone. Ron felt the weight of those words settle inside him. Voldemort wanted him reckless, desperate. He could not give him that satisfaction. But Voldemort was not done. During the next DA meeting, while students practiced Patronus charms, Ron's head throbbed with a sudden, stabbing pain. He staggered, clutching his temples as another vision flared. This time, he saw the castle itself crumbling under fire, Death Eaters pouring through shattered walls. In the chaos, Hermione lay motionless on the ground, Harry screaming over her. Ron gasped, his knees buckling. Hermione rushed to his side, but when he opened his eyes, the room had gone silent. Everyone was watching. "Another vision," Seamus muttered uneasily. "It's happening all the time." "Maybe he's dangerous," whispered a younger Ravenclaw. The words stung, though Ron didn't reply. He met Hermione's eyes, and in them he saw both worry and something sharper, determination. She helped him up, ignoring the murmurs. Later, when they were alone, Hermione pressed his hand tightly in hers. "Listen to me, Ron. You are not Voldemort's puppet. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. But you must stop hiding this from the others. Secrets only make them doubt more." Ron grimaced. "You think if I tell them everything, they'll suddenly trust me?" "I think," Hermione said firmly, "that they'll see you're fighting, not surrendering. That matters more than you know." That night, Ron made a choice. The next time Voldemort sent him a vision, he wouldn't run blindly. He would resist. He would test the vision before acting. He wouldn't let Voldemort twist him into a weapon. But deep down, Ron knew the Dark Lord wouldn't stop until he forced him into an impossible choice. One where hesitation might cost a life, and action might cost his soul. Ron woke in the middle of the night with a cold dread coiling in his chest. The vision that had shaken him this time was unlike the others. It was sharper, clearer, every detail etched into his mind like a memory. He saw the astronomy tower. Harry stood at the top, wand raised, dueling a cloaked figure. Behind them, Hermione was bound to the stone battlements, struggling against enchanted ropes that cut into her skin. The duel was vicious, green light flashing, the figure laughing with Voldemort's voice. Ron jerked upright in bed, his throat raw from a scream he hadn't realized escaped. This was no ordinary vision. It felt too real, too urgent. Every instinct screamed at him to run. He forced himself to sit still, clutching the bed frame so hard his knuckles whitened. "It's another trick," he whispered to himself. "He wants me to move without thinking." But Hermione's terrified face haunted him. What if it wasn't a trick? What if, for once, Voldemort was showing him the truth? Could he risk doing nothing? Ron threw on his robes and crept out of the dormitory. His heart pounded with every step toward the astronomy tower. His mind screamed for him to stop, to wake Harry or Hermione first, but his legs carried him faster, pulled by fear. When he reached the tower stairs, the silence was suffocating. No duel, no shouts, no curses crackling in the air. He ascended anyway, every step echoing in the stone spiral. At the top, the platform was empty. No Harry, no Hermione, no Death Eater. Just the night sky, scattered with stars, the cold wind biting his face. Ron staggered forward, clutching the battlement. He had been tricked again. He knew it. A bitter laugh escaped him. "I'm an idiot," he muttered. "I almost—" But then the wind shifted. From the shadows, a figure stepped out. Tall, cloaked, face hidden. The same one from the vision. Ron froze, his blood turning to ice. "Welcome, Weasley," the figure hissed. The voice was not Voldemort's, but one of his followers. The Dark Lord was right. "You came running like a loyal hound." Ron's wand was in his hand before he could think. "You're lying. This is another trick." The Death Eater laughed. "No trick. The Dark Lord wanted to test you. And you've failed." A blast of red light shot toward him. Ron barely dodged, the spell searing the stone where he had stood. He fired back, his curse cracking across the tower. Sparks lit the night as spells collided. Ron fought desperately, each move fueled by fear and fury. He wasn't just fighting the Death Eater. He was fighting Voldemort's shadow, the poison in his mind. The Death Eater pressed him hard, driving him back against the battlements. "Pathetic," he sneered. "No wonder the Dark Lord saw fit to use you. You'll never be more than his pawn." The words cut deeper than the curses. For a split second, doubt clouded Ron's focus, and the Death Eater's spell grazed his shoulder, searing pain ripping through him. He stumbled, clutching the wound. Then, behind him, another voice rang out. "Expelliarmus!" The Death Eater's wand flew from his grip, soaring across the platform. Harry dashed forward, eyes blazing, Hermione right behind him. The Death Eater cursed, vanishing into smoke before they could seize him. The silence that followed was deafening. Hermione ran to Ron, her hands trembling as she examined his shoulder. "You fool," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Why didn't you wake us?" Ron winced but didn't meet her eyes. "I thought it was real. I thought if I waited you'd," his voice cracked. "You'd die." Harry's face was grim as he stood over them. "That's exactly what Voldemort wanted. He used you to lure us here. If Hermione and I hadn't followed, who knows how many Death Eaters might have been waiting." Ron's stomach twisted. He had done exactly what Voldemort wanted, again. Hermione's hand lingered on his arm, her touch steady despite her shaking. "You're not his pawn, Ron. Not unless you let him be. Next time, you don't face this alone. Promise me." Ron nodded weakly, though shame burned in his chest. He had failed, not only himself but them. As Harry helped him to his feet, Ron realized the truth. Voldemort wasn't just trying to break into his mind. He was setting traps, each more elaborate than the last. And sooner or later, one of those traps might cost lives. That night, as he lay awake with pain throbbing through his shoulder, Ron swore to himself he wouldn't fall for another. But in the back of his mind, Voldemort's laughter echoed still, cold, certain, patient. The next morning, the school was buzzing with whispers. Somehow word had spread that Ron had been lured into a trap on the astronomy tower. By breakfast, almost every table was abuzz with speculation. "Did you hear? He went up there alone. Nearly got himself killed. And dragged Harry and Hermione into it too." Ron kept his head down, staring at his untouched porridge. Every whisper felt like a blade at his back. Across the table, Harry and Hermione exchanged worried looks. They had defended him before, but this time was different. The whole school knew. When the DA gathered that evening in the room of requirement, the tension was suffocating. Dozens of eyes fixed on Ron the moment he walked in. Some were wary, some openly hostile. Seamus was the first to speak, his voice sharp. "How many more times are we supposed to risk ourselves because he can't tell the difference between reality and Voldemort's tricks?" A ripple of agreement ran through the group. Ginny's face was pale with anger. "He's not the enemy. Stop treating him like one." "Then what is he?" Seamus snapped. "Every time Voldemort pokes into his head, he reacts exactly how Voldemort wants. That's not leadership, that's liability." Ron clenched his fists, the heat rising in his chest. He wanted to shout, to tell them they didn't understand, but Hermione's hand brushed his arm. A silent reminder, stay calm. Neville stepped forward, looking torn. "We've all seen what Ron's gone through. But Seamus isn't wrong. If the Dark Lord can manipulate him, then we have to be careful. For everyone's sake." The silence stretched. Dozens of students stared at Ron, waiting. Finally, Ron stepped into the center of the room. His hands trembled, but his voice was steady. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I've given him what he wanted. But do you think I wanted that? Do you think I don't hate him more than anyone? His gaze swept the room, meeting their stares. He broke into my head. He made me see things I can't unsee. And I've been fighting every day not to let him win. If you think that makes me dangerous, then fine. But don't you dare call me his pawn. Not when I've bled for you. The words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, surprisingly, Luna's dreamy voice cut through the silence. You're stronger than you think, Ronald. Nargles thrive on doubt, and Voldemort is just another kind of Nargle, feeding on what scares you most. But you're still here. That means you've already beaten him more than once. Several students shifted uncomfortably, but her odd wisdom softened the edges of the tension. Ginny added fiercely, He saved me more times than I can count. Anyone who doubts him doesn't know Ron at all. The debate didn't end there. Some still looked skeptical, others openly unconvinced, but no one challenged him further. The DA resumed training, though Ron felt the eyes on him throughout, watching, judging, measuring whether he was truly in control. After the meeting, Harry pulled Ron aside. You handled that better than I would have. But you can't just prove it with words. You've got to show them every day. Ron nodded grimly. He knew Harry was right. Voldemort had tried to turn him into bait, into a weak link. If Ron didn't find a way to fight back, the DA might fracture completely, and Voldemort would win without casting a single spell. That night, Ron didn't sleep. Instead, he sat in the common room with Hermione, poring over thick tomes on occlumency and dark magic. His voice was raw as he whispered, If he wants to use me, then I'll make sure he can't. I'll shut him out, even if it kills me. Hermione reached over, squeezing his hand. It won't kill you, Ron. Not if you let us help you. For the first time in weeks, Ron didn't argue. He just held onto her hand, staring into the fire, determined to find a way to silence the Dark Lord's laughter once and for all. But far away, in a darkened chamber, Voldemort sat upon his throne, a cruel smile playing at his lips. His whispers to Lucius Malfoy carried like venom in the air. Weasley resists. Good. Resistance makes the breaking sweeter. Soon, he will not know whether the visions are lies or truth. And when the choice comes, he will destroy himself. Ron had never known exhaustion like this. Each night was a battle with his own mind. Each day a struggle to hide the toll it took. The whispers around the castle hadn't gone away, but worse than the gossip was the silence. The way people stopped talking when he entered the room, the way eyes followed him as if waiting for him to explode. Harry and Hermione refused to leave him alone, but even their presence could not shield him from the shadows Voldemort planted. If Ron was going to survive, if he was going to protect them, he needed more than comfort. He needed control. It was Hermione who found the passage buried in an old text from the restricted section. She slid the heavy book across the table in the library, her eyes shining with determination. Occlumency, she whispered. Not the watered-down version Snape half-taught Harry. This is advanced, meant for Aurors. It says here that occlumency isn't just closing your mind. It's redirecting it, building a shield strong enough to trick the intruder. Ron frowned, his fingers brushing the ancient ink. I could barely block him at all before. How am I supposed to trick Voldemort? Hermione gave him a steady look. Because you know him better than most. He's been inside your head. That means you can learn to mislead him. To make him think he's winning when he's not. Harry leaned forward, voice low. We'll help. I know what it's like to have him in your mind. It's worse than any curse. But if you can twist it back on him, that's something even he won't expect. They began that very night. In the room of requirement, Hermione read aloud the steps. Focus, compartmentalize, redirect. Harry acted as the aggressor, throwing random images and false shouts to break Ron's concentration, while Ron tried to hold his mental defenses steady. At first it was chaos. Ron's thoughts scattered like leaves in the wind. When Harry barked, Hermione's in danger. Ron's heart leapt before he could stop himself, and his defenses shattered. Hermione took notes, adjusting their method. You're reacting emotionally, she told him. He feeds on that. You need to create an anchor, something Voldemort can't shake. Ron thought hard, then closed his eyes. When Harry tried again, Ron forced his mind to return to the image of his family around the Burrows' dinner table. Laughter echoing in the kitchen, the warmth of home. Voldemort couldn't touch that, not really. It wasn't perfect, but it worked longer than before. For the first time, Ron felt a spark of hope. But Voldemort wasn't idle. That night, as Ron slept, the Dark Lord struck harder than ever. The vision came swift and brutal. He was back in the common room. The fire roared, shadows twisting across the walls. Harry lay on the floor, lifeless, his glasses shattered. Hermione stood over him, her wand raised, her expression cold. Ron staggered toward her, horror clawing at his chest. "Hermione, what have you done?" She turned to him, her eyes dark, voice eerily calm. "I was never truly yours, Ron. You were just the weak link. Voldemort showed me the truth." The words sliced deeper than any curse. Ron fell to his knees, the vision so vivid he could feel the heat of the fire, smell the smoke. But then he remembered. Hermione's hand in his earlier, her steady voice telling him he wasn't alone. He clung to that memory, forcing it to the front of his mind. "This isn't real," he snarled through clenched teeth. "You can't make me believe it." The vision wavered. Hermione's form flickered like smoke. Voldemort's laughter echoed, cold and cruel, but there was an edge of irritation in it. Ron woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, but for the first time the triumph outweighed the fear. He had fought back. He had resisted. At breakfast, Harry noticed the change. "You look awful," he said, "but also different. Did something happen?" Ron gave a tired grin. "I told him to shove off. And I think for once he listened." Hermione's relief was clear, though her worry never left her eyes. "It's progress, Ron. But don't think he'll give up. If anything, he'll try harder." Ron nodded grimly. "Let him. If he wants to get into my head, he's going to find out it's not so easy anymore." But far away, Voldemort sat in his lair, fingers tapping the arm of his chair. "Weasley resists," he murmured to Bellatrix, who knelt at his feet. "Good. Let him grow strong. When the moment comes, he will not know whether he strikes at me, or at the ones he loves." Bellatrix cackled, her eyes wild with delight. "And then, Master, his betrayal will be complete." The room of requirement pulsed with the sounds of spells and shouts as the DA trained. Sparks flew, shields shimmered, and laughter occasionally broke through the intensity. For a moment, Ron allowed himself to believe things were normal. He moved among the groups, correcting wand angles, offering encouragement, trying to prove with every action that he was not the liability many thought him to be. But halfway through the session, it hit. A sharp pain lanced through Ron's skull, so sudden he nearly dropped his wand. His vision blurred, and before he could steady himself, Voldemort's world replaced his own. He was no longer in the room of requirement. Instead, he stood in a dark corridor. Harry and Hermione were there, but their faces were twisted with betrayal. Harry's wand was aimed at him, eyes cold. Hermione's voice rang out, cutting like ice. "It was always you, Ron. You're the weakness. You're the reason we'll lose." Ron staggered, clutching his head. The vision was too vivid, too sharp. He could hear the echo of their voices, smell the damp stone of the corridor. It felt real. Too real. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "This isn't." But the vision pressed harder. Harry shouted, "Stupefy." A jet of red light shot toward him. Instinct took over. Ron raised his wand and fired back, rage and fear surging through him. When the haze cleared, he realized he wasn't in a dark corridor at all. He was in the room of requirement. And standing across from him, her hair singed from his curse, was Hannah Abbott, staring at him in shock. The entire DA froze. Silence crashed over the room. "What are you doing?" Seamus shouted, grabbing Hannah's arm to pull her back. "You could have killed her." Ron's stomach lurched. "I know, I saw." He looked around wildly, searching for Hermione, for Harry. Both of them had already rushed forward, grabbing his arms before he could do more damage. "Ron, stop!" Hermione's voice was urgent, terrified. It was a vision. It wasn't real. The DA erupted in chaos. Voices overlapped, angry, fearful. "He attacked one of us. He's dangerous. I told you we couldn't trust him." Ginny's voice tried to cut through the storm. It wasn't him, it was Voldemort. But the words were drowned in the uproar. Harry tightened his grip on Ron's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." They half-dragged, half-guided him out of the room of requirement, the noise of betrayal and panic chasing them into the corridor. Ron's heart pounded, his breath ragged. He had almost hurt someone. He had almost killed someone. In the quiet of the empty hallway, Hermione turned him to face her. Her hands trembled as she clutched his robes. "You have to fight harder, Ron. You can't let him trick you like this again." Ron's voice broke. I thought it was you. I saw you both turning on me. It felt real. I didn't even think. I just... Harry's expression was grim, his jaw tight. That's what he wants. To make you doubt us. To make us doubt you. And if he keeps this up, it's going to tear the DA apart. Ron sagged against the wall, guilt crushing him. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am dangerous. What if next time it isn't Hannah, but... His eyes darted to Hermione. He couldn't finish the thought. Hermione shook her head fiercely, tears threatening in her eyes. No, you're not dangerous. He is. And that's exactly why you can't give up. For the rest of the night, Ron couldn't shake the image of Hannah's shocked face, the smell of burnt hair in the air. Voldemort had set a new trap, and this time, Ron had stumbled right into it. Far away, Voldemort's laughter echoed through his followers' ranks as he relished the victory. He falters, he murmured. He fears himself. Soon his friends will fear him too. And then he will stand alone. The next DA meeting was unlike any before. The room of requirement no longer buzzed with excitement or determination. It throbbed with tension. Whispers crackled like static as members clustered in groups, their eyes darting toward Ron whenever they thought he wasn't looking. Harry, Hermione, and Ginny flanked him as they walked in, but even their presence didn't muffle the low voices. Hannah Abbott sat on a bench near the wall, her arms still wrapped from the curse Ron had cast. Though she didn't meet his eyes, the sight of her made his stomach churn with guilt. Seamus was the first to break the silence. Are we really just going to let him stay after what happened? His voice carried, sharp and challenging. He nearly blasted Hannah across the room. Next time it could be worse. Next time, Ernie Macmillan added, it could be fatal. The murmur of agreement spread quickly. Some nodded, others crossed their arms, waiting. Ron's chest tightened. He wanted to shout that it hadn't been him, that it was Voldemort's trick, but the words caught in his throat. Would they even believe him? Ginny's temper snapped before his did. She stood up, fire in her eyes. You lot act like you don't know what's at stake. Voldemort is using Ron because he's scared of him. If Ron was truly his pawn, why would Voldemort keep trying to break him? That's one way of looking at it, Seamus shot back. Or maybe Voldemort's already winning. Maybe Ron's just the weak link, and we're all too blind to admit it. The room broke into argument, voices overlapping, accusations flying. Some sided with Seamus, insisting Ron's presence was a risk they couldn't afford. Others, led by Ginny and Luna, argued that abandoning him would hand Voldemort the victory he wanted. Through it all, Ron stayed silent, fists clenched at his sides. The noise felt distant, muffled, like he was underwater. He didn't need to hear the words to know the truth. They were afraid of him. Finally, Neville raised his voice, louder than anyone expected. Enough! The room stilled. He stepped forward, his face solemn. We all know Ron made a mistake. But we also know what Voldemort does. He twists, he manipulates, he makes you doubt everything. If we can't stand together, then what's the point of the DA at all? Neville's words calmed some, but not all. Seamus folded his arms, muttering under his breath. Hannah still wouldn't look at Ron. Hermione squeezed Ron's arm. Say something, she whispered urgently. Ron swallowed, then stepped forward. His voice was rough but steady. I don't blame any of you for being scared. I'm scared too. Voldemort's in my head every night, and sometimes I don't know what's real anymore. But I'm not giving in. I'm fighting him, even when it feels impossible. And if you think I'm dangerous, then fine. I'll walk away. But don't you dare think I'd ever betray you. Not for him. Not for anyone. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Luna's soft, dreamlike voice. He's telling the truth. His aura's brighter than it's ever been. Some students laughed nervously, but no one challenged her. Slowly, the tension eased. The meeting resumed, though the energy was muted, wary. When it ended, Ron lingered behind, too drained to move. Harry clapped him on the shoulder. That took guts. But you need more than speeches now. You need control. Hermione nodded. The visions are getting worse. If you can't fight them off faster, Voldemort will use them again. Ron rubbed his face, exhaustion dragging at him. And if I can't? If he tricks me again? Ginny's voice was fierce. Then we'll stop you. That's what friends are for. Her words steadied him, but only slightly. Deep down, Ron knew Voldemort had succeeded in planting a seed of doubt, not just in the DA, but in Ron himself. He could resist, he could fight, but every time he faltered, it proved Voldemort's grip was not broken. And somewhere in the darkness, Voldemort whispered to himself with relish, "Soon the boy will see the truth. To save them, he must destroy them." The next morning, Ron found himself summoned to the headmaster's office. He had barely slept, his mind still haunted by the whispers of the DA meeting and Voldemort's laughter lingering like poison. Harry and Hermione walked with him as far as the stone gargoyle, but Dumbledore had requested to see Ron alone. Inside, the office was filled with the usual curious objects. Silver instruments whirring softly, portraits of former headmasters pretending to sleep. Fawkes perched on his stand, tilting his head at Ron as if weighing his soul. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, his blue eyes unusually grave. "Please sit, Mr. Weasley." Ron obeyed, his palms clammy. "I didn't mean to hurt Hannah." "I know," Dumbledore interrupted gently. "But intentions, while important, are not enough when Voldemort himself has learned how to bend your reality." Ron's throat tightened. "Then what am I supposed to do? I can't stop him. Every time I think I can, he gets stronger." Dumbledore's gaze softened. "You cannot stop Voldemort from trying, but you can learn to shield yourself. You must study occlumency." Ron blinked. "That's the thing with shutting him out of my head, right? Harry tried with Snape last year. It didn't go well." "Indeed," Dumbledore said. "Harry struggled because he resisted the method, and because the relationship between him and Professor Snape was fraught with mistrust. But you, Ron, you may not have the luxury of avoiding it." The name alone made Ron's stomach twist. "Snape? You're saying I have to learn from him?" Dumbledore folded his hands. "Severus remains the most skilled occlumens at Hogwarts. I will not deny his teaching style is severe. But if you are to resist Voldemort, you must endure it." Ron wanted to protest, to refuse outright. The thought of Snape prying into his mind was nearly unbearable. But then he remembered Hannah's terrified face, the whispers of the DA, the way Hermione's voice had broken when she begged him to fight harder. If he didn't, more people would suffer. He nodded stiffly. "Fine. I'll do it." Later that evening, Dumbledore escorted Ron down to the dungeon. Snape was already waiting, his expression unreadable, though his eyes gleamed with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. "So," Snape drawled, "the headmaster believes you worthy of my time. An interesting choice." Ron bristled, but bit back a retort. He couldn't afford to lose his temper. Snape gestured toward the center of the room. "We begin now. Occlumency requires discipline, focus, and above all, the ability to master your emotions. 3 things you seem to lack in abundance." Ron's fists clenched, but he forced himself to stay silent. Snape raised his wand. "Legilimens." The spell hit Ron like a tidal wave. In an instant, his mind was stripped bare. He was 11 again, sitting in the great hall, hearing his mother's disappointed voice whisper in his ear about being overshadowed by his brothers. He was 12, watching Hermione frozen like stone after the basilisk attack, powerless to help her. He was 15, standing alone at Grimmauld Place, watching Harry and Hermione whisper to each other while he sat on the sidelines. Ron gasped, clutching his head as he tried to shove Snape out. But the images kept coming, each one twisted, sharpened, made cruel. His worst fears played out like theater, and Voldemort's shadow hovered behind them all. "Pathetic," Snape sneered, pulling back at last. "You have the defenses of a flobberworm. The Dark Lord would pluck your mind apart like petals from a daisy." Ron staggered, breathing hard. "This is useless. I'll never." "You will," Snape snapped, his voice cutting like a blade. "Or you will doom us all. Occlumency is not about strength, Weasley. It is about control. Until you master yourself, Voldemort will master you." For the next hour, Snape forced Ron to endure wave after wave of legilimency. Each time, Ron tried to block him, to focus on clearing his thoughts, but the visions only grew sharper. Finally, Snape lowered his wand, his face cold. "Enough for today. Return tomorrow, and the day after that, until you learn to silence your mind. If you cannot, you may as well tie a ribbon on your head and deliver yourself to the Dark Lord personally." Ron staggered out of the dungeon, his head pounding, his pride shredded. Yet beneath the exhaustion, something flickered, an ember of determination. Snape was right. If he couldn't master this, Voldemort would destroy him. That night, as Ron lay in bed, he whispered to himself, "I won't let him win. Not this time." And somewhere far away, Voldemort paused in his plotting, frowning faintly. For the first time, he sensed resistance, weak, flickering, but real. The following evening, Ron trudged back down to the dungeon, his stomach knotted with dread. Snape's first lesson had left him drained and humiliated, but also sharper than he had expected. He'd spent half the night lying awake, trying to practice clearing his thoughts, focusing on one simple image. The warmth of the Burrow's kitchen, sunlight spilling across the table, his mum humming softly. It was the only thing strong enough to push back the chaos. Snape was waiting as always, robes sweeping like shadows across the floor. "You return," he said dryly. "Remarkable. I half expected you to run crying to the headmaster after one session." Ron clenched his jaw. "I'm not quitting." "Then prove it." Snape raised his wand without another word. Legilimens. The rush came again, brutal and unrelenting. Ron saw himself at the Yule Ball, standing awkwardly in dress robes while Hermione danced with Victor Crumb, her smile brighter for him than it had ever been for Ron. The sting of inadequacy burned through his chest. But instead of collapsing under it, Ron clung desperately to the image he'd practiced. The Burrow. Sunlight. His mum's voice. He forced it forward like a shield. The memory wavered under Snape's probing, but it held. For the first time, the intrusion slowed. Snape's eyes narrowed as he pulled back. "Interesting. Perhaps you are not entirely hopeless." Ron sagged with relief, sweat dripping down his face. "I did it." "You resisted," Snape corrected coolly. "Barely. But resistance is a beginning." The next attempts came harder. Snape dragged forward memory after memory. Harry and Hermione whispering in the Gryffindor common room, Ginny walking away from him after an argument, Percy's betrayal when he sided with the Ministry. Each was sharpened, poisoned, made to wound him. But each time, Ron fought to summon the warmth of the Burrow. The smell of fresh bread. The clatter of gnomes in the garden. The sound of Fred and George's laughter. Slowly, shakily, he began to force Snape out sooner. When Snape ended the session, his expression was unreadable. "You are fueled by sentiment," he said at last. "Pathetic but effective. For now. You are not strong because of your mind, Weasley. You are strong because you cling to those you love. Use it, or lose them." Ron wiped his forehead, breathing hard. "Why are you helping me, really? You hate me." Snape's eyes glinted with something strange, anger, bitterness, but also something Ron couldn't quite name. "I am not helping you. I am helping the war. Do not mistake the two." Ron left the dungeon shaken, but this time, not entirely crushed. He had survived. He had even fought back. It wasn't victory, but it was something. Yet far away, Voldemort paced in irritation. He could feel Ron's resistance strengthening, a wall where there had once been only open doors. His lip curled in disdain. "He is learning," Voldemort hissed. "No matter. If I cannot control him through fear, then I will reach him through desire." Bellatrix tilted her head. "Desire, my lord?" A cold smile spread across Voldemort's face. "Everyone longs for something. Even loyalty. Even love. The boy believes he is betrayed. Let us give him more reasons to doubt. If he resists me, let him drown in the suspicion of his friends." In Hogwarts, Ron woke from a restless dream, his chest tight. He couldn't remember the details, only Hermione's voice, whispering to Harry in the dark, their faces hidden from him. The doubt crept in like smoke, even as he tried to push it away. And the war for his mind raged on. The days after Ron's second occlumency lesson dragged like heavy chains. His head throbbed constantly, his nerves frayed from the relentless battles inside his mind. He hadn't told Harry or Hermione how bad the visions were getting. They already worried enough. But no matter how hard he fought to build his defenses, Voldemort seemed to find cracks, slipping in with poisonous whispers. The latest vision came during Transfiguration. Professor McGonagall was demonstrating a complex spell, but Ron's quill slipped from his fingers as the world around him warped. Suddenly, he was no longer in the classroom. He stood in the Gryffindor common room. Harry and Hermione sat close together by the fire, their heads bent in conversation. Hermione's hand brushed Harry's, lingering. "He'll never be strong enough," Hermione's voice said, low and certain. Ron will break before the end. We can't risk trusting him. Harry nodded. We'll have to leave him behind. The vision burned like acid in Ron's chest. He wanted to scream, to tear the scene apart, but he couldn't move. He could only watch as the two people he trusted most looked at each other, united against him. When the vision snapped away, he was back in the classroom, Hermione nudging his arm with concern. Ron, you dropped your quill. Her voice was gentle, warm, nothing like in the vision, but doubt coiled in his gut. Was Voldemort twisting her words, or showing him the truth? Later that evening, Hermione found him in the library, his books spread across the table but unread. She sat down beside him, her eyes softening when she saw his exhaustion. You're pushing yourself too hard, she said quietly. Even Harry can see it. Ron stared at her, his throat dry. What did you two talk about by the fire last night? She blinked in surprise. By the fire? We were going over the DA's new plans. Why? He hesitated, the words clawing at his throat. Voldemort wanted him to doubt her, he knew that. But the vision had felt so real. Nothing. Just wondering. Hermione leaned closer, lowering her voice. Ron, you can't keep bottling this up. The visions, the pressure, it'll eat you alive if you don't talk to us. He wanted to tell her. He wanted to confess everything. The betrayal he saw, the fear that maybe she really did think he wasn't strong enough. But Voldemort's laughter lingered in his ears, warning him that saying it out loud would make it real. So he shook his head. I'll be fine. Hermione frowned, clearly unconvinced. She reached out, covering his hand with hers. You're not alone in this. I'm with you. Always. The words cut through some of the fog, steadying him. Her touch grounded him, reminding him of the difference between Voldemort's lies and Hermione's truth. For the first time in days, Ron managed a faint smile. But that night, the visions returned. This time, it wasn't words but silence that tore him apart. Harry and Hermione stood side by side, looking at him from a distance, their faces unreadable. No anger, no compassion, just cold detachment. The space between them and Ron stretched into an abyss, and no matter how he tried, he couldn't cross it. Ron woke drenched in sweat, his fists clenched so tightly his nails dug into his palms. He buried his face in his hands, whispering, "It's not real. It's not real." But the doubt remained. Meanwhile, Voldemort leaned back in his throne-like chair, eyes glittering with cruel delight. He resists me, but suspicion weakens him. Every seed of doubt will bloom into despair. And when the boy questions the loyalty of those he loves, he will come to me, not as my prisoner, but as my ally. At Hogwarts, Ron sat awake until dawn, staring at the first hints of sunlight creeping through the window. He didn't know which was worse, the visions themselves, or the part of him that feared they might be true. Ron avoided Hermione and Harry for most of the next day. He sat at the far end of the Gryffindor table, muttered excuses about homework, and skipped the DA meeting altogether. He told himself it was safer this way, that if Voldemort showed him another twisted vision, at least he wouldn't lash out at the people closest to him. But the distance gnawed at him. Every time he caught Hermione's gaze across the library or heard Harry's voice in the corridor, his chest tightened. Were they whispering about him when he wasn't there? Were Voldemort's visions lies, or windows into truths Ron refused to face? That night, after hours of tossing in bed, he couldn't take it anymore. He slipped out of the dormitory and found Hermione still awake in the common room, her books spread around her like a fortress. She looked up, startled, as Ron shuffled toward her. Ron, it's past 2 in the morning. He sat down heavily across from her, his face pale in the flickering firelight. I need to tell you something. And you can't laugh. Or hate me for it. Hermione closed her book slowly, her expression softening. I'd never laugh at you. Ron swallowed hard. The visions Voldemort shows me, they're not just about random things. They're about you. About you and Harry. Her brow furrowed. What kind of visions? Ron hesitated, shame burning through him, but he forced the words out. He makes me see you two talking about me, saying I'm not strong enough, that you'll leave me behind. Sometimes it feels so real that when I wake up, I don't know what to believe anymore. Hermione's eyes widened, her breath catching. Oh, Ron. She moved around the table to sit beside him, her hand pressing against his arm. That's exactly what Voldemort wants. He knows you fear being left behind, so he twists it into something cruel. You can't believe him. Ron's voice cracked. But what if it's true? What if you and Harry do think I'm just slowing you down? Hermione's grip on his arm tightened, her eyes fierce. Listen to me. Harry and I have never thought that. You're our friend, Ron. You're braver than you know, stronger than you think, and we need you. I need you. Don't let Voldemort steal that from us. The intensity in her voice broke through his defenses, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on his chest lifted slightly. He exhaled shakily. I want to believe you. I really do. Hermione leaned closer, her expression softening into something almost vulnerable. Then believe me. Not him. Voldemort doesn't get to define who you are. You do. The fire crackled between them, the silence heavy but comforting. For once, Ron didn't feel like he was fighting the battle alone. When he finally returned to bed, he slept without visions for the first time in days. Voldemort's voice still lingered at the edges of his mind, but it no longer felt like it owned him. Far away, Voldemort scowled, his patience thinning. So the girl shields him. No matter. Affection can be twisted as easily as fear. If Weasley clings to her, then she shall be the knife I use to cut him apart. At Hogwarts, Hermione sat awake long after Ron had gone, staring into the embers of the fire. She knew Voldemort would not stop. She also knew that if Ron fell, it wouldn't be from weakness, but from carrying too much of the fight on his own. And she silently vowed she would not let him face it alone again. Ron dreaded his third occlumency lesson, but for the first time he walked into the dungeon with something new. Hermione's words echoing in his head. I need you. Don't let Voldemort steal that from us. Snape's eyes narrowed as Ron entered, as if he sensed the change already. You look less like a frightened puffskein, and more like someone who intends to survive. Perhaps you've finally grasped that sentimentality won't save you. Ron didn't rise to the bait. He simply nodded once. Let's get on with it. Snape's lip curled, but he wasted no time. His wand lifted. Legilimens. The invasion slammed into Ron's mind, tearing open memory after memory. He saw Harry being named Quidditch captain, surrounded by cheers, while Ron stood off to the side unnoticed. He saw Percy sneering at him, calling him a disgrace. He saw Hermione turning away, her hand slipping from his. For a heartbeat, the images burned. But Ron closed his eyes and forced himself to focus, not on the doubts, not on the fear, but on what was real. Hermione's hand on his arm in the firelight. Her voice fierce and steady. You're braver than you know. Stronger than you think. The storm of visions faltered. The scenes flickered, losing their sharpness. Snape's presence pressed harder, trying to force its way deeper, but Ron clung to Hermione's words like armor. And then, astonishingly, the door in his mind slammed shut. Snape recoiled, breaking the spell. His expression flickered from surprise to annoyance. Better. Much better. Perhaps you are not entirely hopeless after all. Ron, panting, wiped the sweat from his forehead. That's it then? I did it. You resisted, Snape said coldly. Barely. Do not delude yourself into thinking this is mastery. The Dark Lord will not relent after one attempt. But Ron caught the faintest trace of something else in Snape's eyes, reluctant approval. They went again. And again. Each time, Ron struggled, faltered, but pushed back harder. He learned to shove Snape's presence out faster, sometimes even forcing the memories to crumble before they fully formed. By the end of the lesson, his head throbbed, but he wasn't broken. He was still standing. Snape lowered his wand, studying him. Your strength lies in clinging to others. Foolish, dangerous, but useful. You draw power from loyalty, from affection. Be warned, Weasley, those bonds can be twisted. The Dark Lord knows this. He will not attack your weaknesses directly. He will attack through those you love. The words struck deeper than any curse. Ron thought of Hermione's hand in his, of Harry's steady presence at his side, of Ginny's fiery defense in the DA. Voldemort would use them all if he could. As Ron left the dungeon, his head still aching, he repeated Snape's warning under his breath. Through those you love. That night, when he told Hermione about the lesson, her brow furrowed. He's right. Voldemort knows how much we matter to you. That makes us targets. Ron stared at her, fear and determination warring inside him. Then I have to get stronger. Strong enough to stop him before he uses you against me. Hermione touched his hand, her eyes steady. We'll face him together. He can't break what we've built unless we let him. But in the shadows of the night, Voldemort whispered to himself with cold amusement. Yes, Weasley grows stronger, but his strength binds him to her. Love is a chain as well as a shield, and chains can be pulled until they break. The game had changed. Voldemort would not simply flood Ron with visions of betrayal anymore. Now, he would make Hermione the heart of the trap. The castle slept under a blanket of silence, but Ron tossed restlessly in his bed. His occlumency lessons with Snape had left him drained, yet his mind refused to quiet. The shadows in the dormitory seemed to whisper, tugging at the edges of his thoughts. And then, without warning, Voldemort struck. Ron was no longer in Gryffindor Tower. He stood in a cold, torchlit corridor that seemed to stretch endlessly. At the far end, he saw Hermione. Relief flooded him, until he noticed she wasn't alone. Harry stood beside her, his face grave, his wand drawn. Ron called out, but no sound came. He tried to run toward them, but his feet were rooted in place. Hermione's voice echoed down the corridor. "We can't save him, Harry. He's slipping further into Voldemort's control every day. If we keep him with us, he'll destroy everything." Harry's expression hardened. "So what do we do?" Hermione hesitated, her face twisting with pain. "We cut him off. We leave him behind." The words sliced through Ron like a blade. He struggled to shout, to tell her it wasn't true, but the scene shifted before he could. Now they were closer, their whispers sharp in his ears. Hermione reached out, taking Harry's hand. "It's the only way," she said softly. "Together we'll finish this. Without him." The sight of their joined hands sent a jolt of fury and despair surging through Ron. His vision blurred red. His wand was suddenly in his hand, shaking as he raised it. "No," he roared. And then he woke. He sat bolt upright in bed, drenched in sweat, his wand clutched in his fist. The dormitory was dark, quiet, ordinary. But the echo of Hermione's words still rang in his ears. "We leave him behind." Ron buried his face in his hands, trembling. He knew Voldemort had twisted it, that this was another trap. But the images had felt too real. The pain in Hermione's voice, the weight in Harry's eyes, the warmth of their hands together. He couldn't shake it. The next morning, he avoided Hermione altogether. At breakfast, he sat between Ginny and Neville, muttering excuses when Hermione tried to catch his eye. Harry frowned at him from across the table, clearly sensing something was wrong, but Ron refused to meet his gaze. By the time classes ended, Hermione cornered him in the library. "Ron, what's going on? You've been ignoring me all day." Ron opened his mouth, but the words tangled in his throat. If he told her about the vision, would it plant seeds of suspicion between them? Or worse, would she pity him? He shook his head. "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Hermione said firmly, her eyes searching his. "Talk to me." But before he could answer, Voldemort's laughter echoed faintly in the back of his mind, chilling and triumphant. Ron stumbled away from the table, mumbling something about needing air. He couldn't tell her. Not yet. That night, as he lay awake again, the vision replayed itself over and over. Each time, it felt less like a trick and more like a possibility. What if Voldemort wasn't creating lies, but showing him what was bound to happen? And far away, Voldemort sat in his dark throne room, pleased. He resists my control, but doubt lingers. Doubt is the seed from which betrayal blooms. Soon, Weasley will not know whether to fear me, or those he calls friends. Ron dragged his feet across the stone corridors the next morning, his mind heavy with the memory of the vision. Every word Hermione had spoken in that twisted dream still echoed inside him, clawing at the edges of his trust. He hated himself for even considering it, but the fear wouldn't leave. When he entered the great hall, Hermione waved him over. Her smile was weary but gentle, as though she'd been waiting for him to come around. Harry sat beside her, leaning close as they whispered about something in hushed tones. The sight of their heads together twisted Ron's stomach. He dropped onto the bench across from them instead of beside them. Hermione frowned immediately. "Ron, are you avoiding me again?" "No," he said quickly, stabbing at his eggs with unnecessary force. "Just fancied a different seat today, that's all." Harry's eyes flickered between them, suspicion narrowing his gaze. "You two need to sort this out. We can't afford." "I said it's fine," Ron snapped, louder than intended. Heads turned from the Ravenclaw table, and heat rose in his cheeks. Hermione's mouth pressed into a thin line, but she said nothing. Classes were a blur, and by evening, Hermione had cornered him once more in the library. She refused to let him wriggle away this time, standing firm between him and the door. "Ron," she said, her voice low but unwavering. "I don't know what's going on, but you can't keep shutting me out. Not now. Please, just talk to me." Ron stared at her, the words fighting in his throat. He wanted to tell her everything, that Voldemort had shown him something, that he couldn't tell if it was truth or poison, that he was terrified she and Harry might truly be planning to cast him aside. But the fear of her reaction made his tongue stick. Finally, the silence cracked. "I saw you," he blurted. Hermione blinked. "What do you mean?" "In my head," Ron said, his hands balling into fists. "Voldemort put something in there. You and Harry. Talking about me. Saying I'm a burden. Saying you'd leave me behind." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And you held his hand." The words hung between them like a curse. Hermione's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, slowly, she stepped closer. "Ron, you know that isn't true. You must know it." "I don't know anything anymore," Ron muttered. His chest rose and fell in sharp bursts. It felt so real. Like it's what you really think. What if he's not lying? What if he's just showing me what's going to happen? Hermione's expression softened with sorrow. She reached out, laying a hand on his arm. "He's trying to break you, Ron. That's what he does. He preys on fear and insecurity until you don't trust anyone, not even yourself. But listen to me. I would never abandon you. Harry wouldn't either. You're part of this, no matter what Voldemort wants you to believe." Her words were steady, but Ron's heart still hammered in doubt. Voldemort's laughter seemed to linger in his ears, mocking the promise she made. Before Ron could reply, the library doors banged open. Harry strode in, his eyes sharp. "What's going on?" Hermione's hand slipped from Ron's arm, but she didn't step away. "Ron's been seeing things. Voldemort's getting into his mind." Harry's jaw tightened. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ron's temper flared. "Because I didn't want you both looking at me like I'm some kind of time bomb ready to explode." Harry's voice rose. "Keeping secrets is exactly how Voldemort wins. You think you're protecting yourself, but you're playing right into his hands." The three of them stood in tense silence, the air charged with fear and frustration. For the first time, Ron felt the cracks widening, just as Voldemort had promised. And in the darkness beyond Hogwarts, Voldemort smiled. His trap was tightening. The library air hung heavy after Ron's outburst. The silence was thick enough to choke on, broken only by the faint scratching of quills from distant corners where a few students pretended not to notice the storm brewing among the trio. Ron's fists clenched at his sides. He could feel Harry's stare drilling into him, as though Harry was trying to see inside his mind and decide if Voldemort already had him. That look was unbearable. "What's that supposed to mean?" Ron snapped, his voice rising. "You think I've already switched sides, is that it? That I'll just turn on you the second he whispers in my ear?" Harry stepped closer, his eyes flashing. "I didn't say that. But if you keep hiding things, how are we supposed to trust you?" The word struck Ron like a slap. Trust. That was the one thing gnawing at him, and hearing it on Harry's tongue made the fury boil over. "You don't trust me anyway," Ron barked, his voice echoing off the shelves. "You've never trusted me, not really. I'm just the one who tags along, aren't I? The one who's supposed to laugh at your jokes and cheer when you save the day." "That's not fair." Harry shot back. "You think this is easy for me? Voldemort's been in my head for years. I've had to fight him every day of my life, and now he's going after you too. But you'd rather sulk and think we're plotting against you." Hermione rushed between them, her arms outstretched as though she could physically hold them apart. "Stop it, both of you. This is exactly what Voldemort wants." But Ron wasn't listening anymore. His face burned red, his voice raw. "Maybe it is easier for you, Harry. You've always had everything. Everyone follows you. Everyone believes in you. And me? I'm just the friend who gets left behind. Maybe he's right. Maybe you two don't need me." Hermione's voice broke with desperation. "Ron, that's not true." But Harry's patience had snapped. "If you really believe that, maybe you shouldn't be here." The words hung in the air, sharp as glass. Hermione gasped, her eyes flashing toward Harry in horror, but the damage was already done. Ron's breath hitched as though Harry had struck him. "Fine," Ron said, his voice low and shaking. Maybe I shouldn't. He shoved past Hermione, storming out of the library before either of them could stop him. Hermione rounded on Harry at once, her face pale with fury. How could you say that to him? Harry rubbed his forehead, suddenly looking exhausted. I didn't mean it. I was angry. That doesn't matter. Hermione snapped. Ron already feels like he's slipping away, and now you've given him every reason to believe Voldemort's lies. Harry dropped into a chair, his shoulders sagging. I know, Hermione. But what if he can't fight it? What if we can't trust him anymore? Hermione's voice softened, though her eyes still shone with unshed tears. Then we fight for him. Just like we'd fight for you. Voldemort doesn't get to take him away from us. Meanwhile, Ron stormed through the castle corridors, ignoring the curious stares of passing students. His head was a storm of anger, shame, and hurt. He hated Voldemort for planting the vision, hated Harry for confirming his fears, and hated himself most of all for letting the doubt fester. He didn't stop walking until he found himself outside the castle, the cool night air biting his cheeks. Alone under the stars, he clenched his wand in his hand, shaking with rage. I'll prove them wrong, he muttered into the darkness. I'll prove I'm not weak. But far away, Voldemort stirred, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Yes, prove yourself, young Weasley. Prove yourself, until you no longer know who you are proving it to. The night air cooled Ron's burning anger, but it did nothing to settle the storm inside him. The words Harry had thrown at him echoed in his head like a curse. If you really believe that, maybe you shouldn't be here. Ron's chest tightened every time he replayed it. He wasn't going to sit back and be treated like dead weight. He would show them he could fight, that he mattered. He just needed to act. The forbidden forest loomed nearby, its shadows whispering temptation. Every sensible voice in Ron's head screamed at him to turn back, but he clenched his jaw and stepped into the darkness. The forest was alive with strange noises, the rustle of unseen creatures, the distant screech of a bird, the crunch of leaves underfoot. Ron's wand was gripped so tightly in his hand that his knuckles ached. He told himself he was out here to practice, to test his strength away from Harry and Hermione's watchful eyes. But deep down, he knew he was searching for something, or someone, that could prove he wasn't weak. Hours seemed to pass before he stumbled into a clearing. The moonlight cast pale beams across the ground, and at the center, a massive spider skittered forward, its eyes gleaming with hunger. Ron's stomach lurched. His skin crawled at the sight of it. Memories of Aragog and the swarm of spiders from their second year surged back with sickening force. His breath came fast and shallow. But he didn't run. Not this time. He raised his wand, his voice shaking but firm. Stupefy. A red jet of light hit the spider, sending it tumbling backward. But it wasn't down for long. It screeched, lunging at him with snapping fangs. Ron stumbled, dodged, and cast again. Expulso. The ground beneath the spider exploded, throwing it back with a shriek. For the first time in his life, Ron stood his ground against his greatest fear. His hands trembled, but his spells grew sharper with each cast, his voice louder, steadier. Finally, with one last desperate reducto, the spider collapsed in a heap, twitching before going still. Ron stood panting, sweat soaking his brow, his wand arm aching. The clearing was silent again, save for his ragged breaths. He stared at the spider, his chest swelling with something fierce and unfamiliar, pride. He had done it. Alone. Without Harry, without Hermione. But as he turned to leave, the hairs on the back of his neck prickled. A low, amused chuckle echoed from the shadows. Ron spun around, wand raised. Who's there? From between the trees stepped a cloaked figure, tall and hooded. The voice that followed was smooth and cold. Impressive. Most impressive. Conquering your fear, proving your strength. Voldemort was right about you. Ron's blood froze. His grip on his wand tightened. I'm not interested in what he thinks. The figure tilted its head. A pity. He sees greatness in you. You'll never find that kind of recognition from Potter. Or Granger. To them, you'll always be a shadow. But with us, you could be so much more. Ron's pulse pounded in his ears. The figure's words cut deep, too close to the doubts already festering inside him. He wanted to shout, to deny it, but his throat felt tight. Instead, he managed a single, defiant whisper. Stay away from me. The figure chuckled again, fading back into the trees. "We'll speak again, Weasley. And when you're ready, you'll know where to find us." Ron stumbled out of the forest as dawn began to creep over the horizon. His heart still hammered, but his mind was worse, a battlefield of pride, fear, and dangerous temptation. He had proven himself capable, but at what cost? Back in the castle, Hermione lay awake in the common room, her eyes red from tears and exhaustion. She jolted upright when Ron finally pushed through the portrait hole. "Where have you been?" she whispered, her voice thick with worry. Ron hesitated. For a long moment, he thought about telling her everything. The spider, the cloaked figure, the offer that still echoed in his ears. But the memory of Harry's cutting words stopped him cold. "Just needed some air," Ron muttered, brushing past her toward the stairs. Hermione's worried eyes followed him, but she said nothing. And in the shadows of his throne room, Voldemort's smile widened. The snare had been set. Hermione could not shake the look on Ron's face when he returned to the common room. He had avoided her eyes, his steps heavy, his voice hollow. She knew him too well to accept his excuse. Something had happened out there, something he didn't want her, or Harry, to know. That night, she made her choice. If Ron wouldn't tell her the truth, she would find it herself. When Ron slipped out again the following evening, Hermione was ready. She had tucked her wand into her sleeve, donned her cloak, and cast a disillusionment charm over herself. She followed him quietly through the castle, careful to keep her footsteps silent. Ron moved with purpose, his shoulders tense, his wand clutched tightly at his side. He didn't glance back once, too wrapped in his own thoughts to notice the faint shimmer of Hermione shadowing him. Her heart pounded as she realized where he was heading, the Forbidden Forest. Every instinct screamed at her to stop, to run and fetch Harry or even Dumbledore. But she couldn't. If Ron was in danger of slipping into Voldemort's grasp, she had to be the one to reach him before it was too late. The trees swallowed them whole, the canopy blotting out the moonlight. Hermione kept her distance, weaving through the shadows as Ron pressed deeper into the woods. At last, he stopped in the same clearing as before. Hermione's stomach twisted when she saw the carcass of the giant spider, its limbs sprawled grotesquely across the ground. She covered her mouth to stifle a gasp. Ron had done this alone. But before she could process it, movement stirred at the edge of the clearing. A hooded figure stepped out from the shadows, just as it had the night before. Hermione froze, her breath shallow. "Death Eater. You came back," the figure purred. Its voice was low, sly. "I knew you would. The taste of power is addictive, isn't it?" Ron's wand shot up. "I didn't come back for you." His voice cracked, but his hand was steady. The figure laughed softly. "You're angry. Good. Anger makes you strong. They don't see that, do they? Potter and Granger. To them, you're a liability, a burden they carry. But Voldemort sees your potential." "Shut up," Ron spat. The figure took a step closer, unafraid. "You don't have to shut it out. You know it's true. How long before Potter says the words again? Maybe you shouldn't be here. How long before Granger leaves you behind? She already questions your worth." Hermione's nails dug into her palms. The urge to break her concealment, to scream that it wasn't true, nearly overwhelmed her. But she forced herself to stay still, to listen. Ron's jaw clenched. "I'll never join Voldemort." "Never?" the figure mused, tilting its head. "Or not yet." Hermione had heard enough. With a flick of her wand, she dropped the disillusionment charm and burst into the clearing. Expelliarmus. The spell ripped the wand from the Death Eater's hand, sending it flying into the underbrush. The hooded figure hissed, retreating instantly into the trees. "Hermione!" Ron shouted, shock and fury colliding in his voice. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same," she shot back, breathless. Her eyes burned with a mix of fear and anger. "Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? Meeting them, letting them talk to you like that." "I wasn't meeting them." Ron roared. "I didn't ask for this. They found me. Then why come back?" Hermione demanded. Ron faltered, his face pale, his mouth opening and closing without an answer. The truth was too raw to speak. That part of him had needed to prove the vision wrong, while another darker part had wanted to hear the offer again, if only to refuse it louder. Hermione's eyes softened despite her fear. "Ron, you're playing right into Voldemort's hands. Every time you come here, every time you listen, you let him in just a little more." Ron turned away, shame twisting his face. You don't understand. I do, Hermione said gently, stepping closer. That's why I followed you. I'm not letting him take you from us. For a long moment, Ron said nothing. Then, without looking back, he muttered, If Harry finds out. Hermione's jaw tightened. Harry will find out. But we'll tell him together. Because if you keep hiding this, Ron, Voldemort has already won. Ron's silence was answer enough. Hermione reached out, taking his arm, and together they walked out of the forest. From the shadows, the hooded figure watched them go. Its lips curled into a sneer. The Dark Lord would not be pleased, but there was time. Weasley's doubts were still alive, still festering. And doubt was the strongest weapon of all. The next morning, Hermione hardly slept, her mind tangled with the memory of Ron standing in that clearing with the Death Eater. She knew Voldemort's hold on him wasn't absolute yet, but the danger was growing with every secret Ron kept. If they didn't act soon, he would slip beyond their reach. She found Ron at breakfast, slouched over his plate and pushing scrambled eggs around with his fork. His eyes were bloodshot, his movements sluggish. Hermione slid onto the bench beside him, her voice low but urgent. Ron, we can't wait anymore. We have to tell Harry. Ron stiffened. No. Ron, Hermione pressed, leaning closer so no one else could hear. This isn't just about you. Voldemort is using you as a wedge between us. If Harry doesn't know, he can't help stop it. Ron's hand tightened on his fork until his knuckles whitened. You heard what he said yesterday. He doesn't trust me anymore. If I tell him, it'll only prove him right. Hermione's chest ached at the hopelessness in his voice. She placed a hand gently over his. That's exactly what Voldemort wants you to think. Harry was angry, but he doesn't believe you're lost. He just doesn't know how much you're carrying. Let him in, Ron. Please. For a moment, Ron's eyes flickered with hesitation, torn between fear and the small thread of trust Hermione was offering him. His lips parted as though he might finally agree. And then the great hall doors banged open. Professor McGonagall swept in, her face pale and severe. She stopped at the Gryffindor table, her eyes locking on Ron and Hermione. The headmaster requests to see you. Both of you. Immediately. A ripple of murmurs spread through the hall. Ron shot Hermione a panicked glance, but she squeezed his hand under the table. Together, they followed McGonagall out. The walk to Dumbledore's office was suffocating. Ron's heart hammered, his thoughts wild. Had someone seen him in the forest? Had the Death Eater told Voldemort of Hermione's interference? Was Dumbledore about to cast him out? The office door creaked open, and there stood Dumbledore behind his desk, his expression grave yet tinged with that ever-present calm. Fawkes dozed quietly on his perch, a faint golden glow warming the room. Please sit, Dumbledore said gently. Hermione perched on the edge of a chair, her back stiff. Ron remained standing, his fists clenched at his sides. Dumbledore's blue eyes settled on Ron, piercing yet kind. I believe you've been venturing into the forest at night. Ron's breath caught. Aye. You needn't deny it, Dumbledore continued. I do not raise this to scold you, Ronald, but because I know who has been waiting for you there. Hermione leaned forward. You knew. I have long felt Voldemort's shadow creeping nearer, Dumbledore said softly. He seeks to exploit divisions, to weaken bonds of trust. And you, Ron, are vulnerable. Not because you are weak, but because you doubt your own worth. Ron's ears burned, his throat tight. Dumbledore's words sliced too close to the truth. I've fought it, Ron muttered. I told him no. And that is why you are still here, Dumbledore replied, his gaze unwavering. But temptation rarely comes all at once. It creeps slowly, until you mistake its voice for your own. Each night you return, his influence grows. Hermione's hands balled in her lap. Then what do we do? How do we stop it? Dumbledore folded his hands, his expression grave. You must not keep this from Harry. Secrets feed mistrust, and mistrust is Voldemort's greatest weapon. Tell him everything, and do so soon. Only then can you stand together against what is coming. Ron swallowed hard. Shame burned inside him, but also a strange relief. For once, the decision wasn't his alone. I don't know if he'll listen, Ron whispered. Dumbledore's eyes softened. Harry has faced many trials, but his loyalty to his friends has never faltered. Trust in that, Ron, even when you cannot trust yourself. Hermione reached for Ron's hand again, this time openly. We'll tell him. Together. Ron met her eyes, and for the first time in days, he gave a small nod. Outside the office, the weight of the conversation pressed heavy, but also clearer. Ron knew what he had to do. The fear of Harry's rejection still gnawed at him, but if he stayed silent any longer, Voldemort had already won. In the shadows of the castle grounds, unseen, a raven perched on a branch took flight, its black feathers glinting in the sun. Far away, a message reached Voldemort's ears. The boy was wavering. The game was far from over. The Gryffindor common room buzzed with chatter that evening, but Ron barely noticed. He sat hunched in a corner chair, staring into the fire while Hermione paced behind him, rehearsing the words they needed to say. "Ron, we can't wait any longer," she whispered urgently. "Dumbledore's right. Harry has to know tonight, before Voldemort pushes any further." Ron nodded stiffly, his stomach twisting into knots. "I know. But what if he—" "Ron," Hermione interrupted, her voice firm, "you have to trust Harry as much as you want him to trust you." Before Ron could answer, the portrait hole swung open, and Harry climbed inside. His hair was windswept, his face flushed from Quidditch practice. He looked exhausted, but when his eyes landed on Ron and Hermione, the exhaustion sharpened into suspicion. "You two look like you've been plotting something," Harry said flatly, dropping his broom against the wall. Hermione stepped forward, her voice gentle but steady. "We need to talk." "About Ron." Harry's jaw tightened. "What about him?" Ron pushed himself to his feet, his palms sweating. He forced himself to meet Harry's eyes. "I should have told you earlier. Voldemort's been getting into my head." Harry froze. For a moment, silence blanketed the room. Then slowly he stepped closer. "What do you mean?" Ron swallowed hard. "He showed me something. You and Hermione. Talking about me. Saying I was useless, that I'd only hold you back." "Anne," his voice cracked. "And you held her hand." Harry's face darkened. "That's what this has been about. You thought it was real. I didn't know what to think." Ron snapped, his voice raw. "It felt real, Harry. Too real. And then you said," his throat closed, the memory of Harry's words stabbing him fresh, "maybe you shouldn't be here." Harry's eyes widened in understanding. "That's why you've been avoiding us. Why you've been sneaking off." Hermione stepped in quickly. "There's more." Ron went into the forest. Twice. He fought a giant spider, and a Death Eater found him. Tried to recruit him. Harry rounded on Ron, his voice low and dangerous. "You went into the forest alone? And you didn't tell me?" Ron's hands curled into fists. "I didn't want you looking at me like I was weak. I wanted to prove I could do something without you holding my hand." Harry's face twisted with anger. "Prove yourself? By running straight into Voldemort's trap? Do you have any idea how reckless that was? If Hermione hadn't followed you." "I didn't ask her to follow me." Ron exploded. "I didn't ask for any of this." The common room had gone silent around them. First years huddled by the staircase, watching with wide, frightened eyes. Hermione stepped between them, her voice breaking. "Stop it. Both of you. This isn't helping." But neither boy seemed to hear her. Harry's voice shook with fury. "Do you know what it feels like, Ron? Having Voldemort in your head, twisting everything, making you doubt everyone around you? I've been living with that for years. And you," his voice cracked. "You should have trusted me enough to tell me." Ron's chest heaved, his own fury boiling over. "I wanted to. But you already think I'm a joke. Why would you believe me?" For a moment, their eyes locked, anger and hurt crashing together like waves. Then Harry turned away, his fists trembling at his sides. "I can't do this right now." He stormed up the stairs to the dormitory, leaving Ron and Hermione standing in the stunned silence of the common room. Hermione pressed her hands to her temples, tears stinging her eyes. "Oh, Ron," she whispered. Ron sank back into his chair, staring at the fire with hollow eyes. His confession was out, but instead of bringing them together, it had ripped the crack even wider. And somewhere far away, Voldemort felt the rift deepen, savoring it like the sweetest of victories. The next morning, the great hall buzzed with its usual clatter of voices and clinking goblets, but the tension at the Gryffindor table was thick enough to silence anyone nearby. Harry sat hunched over his porridge, not touching it, his face pale and tight. Ron sat at the far end, stabbing at toast he had no intention of eating. Hermione sat miserably between them, the invisible weight pressing harder with every passing minute. She had stayed awake long after Harry stormed off, hoping he would come back down and talk. But he hadn't. And when she checked on Ron, he had been slumped in the chair by the fire, eyes red and hollow, refusing to go upstairs. It had been one of the few times she felt utterly powerless. Now, watching them avoid each other like strangers, Hermione knew she couldn't let it fester. The longer they stayed apart, the more Voldemort's poison would spread. "Harry," she said softly, leaning toward him. "You have to talk to him. Please." Harry didn't look up. "I'm not the one who's been sneaking off into the forest. I'm not the one who let Voldemort crawl into my head and didn't say a word." Hermione's heart twisted. "That's not fair. You know how hard it was for him. He was scared you wouldn't believe him." Harry slammed his spoon down, making a few Gryffindors glance nervously at their table. "And I didn't. He should have trusted me enough to try." Hermione flinched but forced her voice steady. "And what about you, Harry? How many times have you kept things bottled up because you didn't want to burden us? How many times have you tried to face things on your own because you thought no one could understand?" That silenced him. Harry's hand stilled, his gaze flicking up to meet hers for just a moment before dropping again. At the far end of the table, Ron shoved his plate away and stood abruptly. His chair scraped loudly against the floor as he strode toward the doors, ignoring the whispers that followed. Hermione's breath caught. She wanted to run after him, but Harry's stillness kept her in place. She had to fix this now, before the gap widened into something unfixable. "Harry," she said gently, her voice lowering so only he could hear. "He needs you. He's fighting Voldemort inside his head just like you have. You of all people should know how terrifying that is. Don't punish him for being scared." Harry's hands clenched in his lap, his shoulders shaking slightly. Finally, he muttered, "I don't want to lose him, Hermione. But every time he pulls away, it feels like I already am." Hermione's throat tightened. "Then don't let him slip further. Talk to him before Voldemort convinces him there's no way back." Harry looked up, his green eyes burning with pain and conflict. For a moment, he seemed ready to argue again. Then, with a sharp breath, he pushed back from the table and followed Ron out of the hall. Hermione exhaled shakily, her hands trembling. She whispered to herself, "Please, let this work." Outside in the courtyard, Ron was sitting on the steps, elbows on his knees, staring at the ground as though it might swallow him whole. When Harry approached, Ron didn't look up. "What do you want?" Ron muttered. Harry's jaw clenched, but he forced himself to sit down beside him. The silence stretched painfully until Harry finally spoke, his voice low but fierce. "You think you're the only one Voldemort messes with? You think you're the only one who's seen things that rip you apart inside? He's been in my head for years, Ron. He's made me doubt Hermione, Dumbledore, everyone I care about. And you know what? The only way I survived it was because I had you." Ron's head jerked up, his eyes blazing with disbelief. "I nearly lost it, Harry. I nearly believed him. What kind of friend does that make me?" Harry's voice cracked, but he didn't look away. "It makes you human. And it means I'll fight like hell to make sure he doesn't take you from me. But you have to fight too. You can't keep shutting me out." For a long time, Ron said nothing. His fists clenched, then unclenched. The voices of students echoed faintly from inside, but the courtyard felt suspended, holding its breath. Finally, Ron whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough." Harry stared at him, then placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. "You don't have to be. That's why you've got me. That's why you've got Hermione." Ron blinked rapidly, his throat tight, his anger finally crumbling into something rawer. He nodded once slowly. And unseen by either boy, Hermione stood just inside the doorway, silent tears streaming down her cheeks. For the first time in weeks, hope stirred inside her. The cracks hadn't healed, not completely, but maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't break apart after all. Far away, Voldemort's fury lashed through his followers, cold and merciless. "They resist me still," he hissed. "But doubt remains. And doubt is all I need." The fragile peace between Harry and Ron lasted only a few days. Hermione noticed small changes, Ron eating more, Harry speaking to him without sharp edges in his voice, the two of them walking side by side again. It was far from perfect, but it was enough to let her breathe a little easier. But Voldemort had no intention of letting that peace grow. That night, Ron dreamed again. At first, it seemed almost ordinary. He was in the burrow, the kitchen glowing with warm firelight. His mother stirred a pot, humming softly, and the smell of stew filled the air. Ginny laughed upstairs. Fred and George bickered over something ridiculous. For the first time in weeks, Ron felt safe. Then the air chilled. The fire dimmed, the laughter turned to screams, and his mother crumpled to the floor. Standing in the doorway was Voldemort, his crimson eyes glinting with terrible amusement. "Look at them," the Dark Lord hissed, his voice curling like smoke. "So fragile. So easily broken. And all because of you, Ron Weasley." Ron shook his head desperately. "No, leave them alone." Voldemort stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Do you know why I haunt your mind, boy? Not because you are strong, but because you are weak. You doubt yourself. You doubt your friends. And every moment you hesitate, every secret you keep, puts them in greater danger." The floor cracked beneath Ron's feet, revealing flashes of Harry and Hermione dueling Death Eaters. Harry staggered under a curse, Hermione screamed his name, and Voldemort's laugh filled the world. "They will die for you," Voldemort whispered. "Unless you choose differently." Ron's voice shook. "Choose what?" "Choose me," Voldemort said smoothly. "Do you truly think Potter values you? Even now, he suspects you. Hermione pities you. They do not trust you, not as I do. With me, you could be powerful, respected, feared. No one would ever call you second best again." A wand appeared in Ron's hand, heavier than his own. Its handle gleamed darkly, pulsing with power. Voldemort's voice coiled around him like a serpent. "Take it. Imagine what you could do. Imagine saving them, not as a boy but as a leader. Your destiny does not lie in Potter's shadow." Ron's breath came in ragged gasps. His fingers twitched on the wand, and for one terrifying moment he wanted it. He wanted the strength, the certainty, the escape from doubt that had haunted him for so long. But then, faintly through the darkness, he heard Hermione's voice. Not distorted or cruel as before, but clear, steady, and real. "Ron, don't listen. He's lying. You're stronger than this." The dream flickered, Voldemort's image wavering. Rage twisted the Dark Lord's face. "She cannot save you forever. Sooner or later, you will give in. And when you do, I will use you to destroy them." Ron woke with a strangled gasp, clutching his bedsheets. His whole body trembled as he fought to steady his breathing. The dormitory was quiet, but the echo of Voldemort's promise throbbed in his skull. By morning, the weight of the dream hadn't lifted. Ron sat through breakfast in silence, pushing food around his plate, while Harry and Hermione exchanged worried glances. He couldn't bring himself to tell them, not yet. Voldemort had crossed a new line, offering him not just fear but temptation. And deep inside, Ron was terrified of what that meant. Far away, Voldemort sat in the shadows, smiling coldly. He resists. But he wavers. It is only a matter of time. Ron avoided Harry all morning, though he tried to act as though nothing was wrong. But Hermione wasn't fooled. She had been watching him since he stumbled down from the dormitory at dawn, his face pale, his eyes shadowed, and his hands trembling ever so slightly. By the time lunch ended, she had made up her mind. She cornered him in the empty Charms corridor. "Ron, what happened last night?" Ron stiffened. "Nothing. I didn't sleep well, that's all." Hermione folded her arms. "Don't lie to me. I've seen you after Quidditch nightmares, after exams, after fights with Harry. This is different. Something's wrong." For a long moment, Ron stared at the floor, jaw clenched. His throat felt tight, the memory of Voldemort's words clawing at him. He wanted to tell her, but the shame was unbearable. If she knew he had almost taken that wand in the dream, if she knew part of him had wanted it, would she ever look at him the same way again? "Ron," Hermione said more softly, stepping closer. "Please. I can't help you if you don't tell me." His eyes flicked up to hers. They were steady, warm, unflinching. And in that look, he found the courage to let the words spill. "He offered me power," Ron whispered, his voice cracking. "Last night, in the dream. Voldemort. He showed me my family, the burrow, and then he made it all fall apart. Said it was my fault. Said if I joined him, if I took his wand, I could protect them. That I'd never be second best again." Hermione's breath caught. She reached for his arm, gripping it tightly. "Ron, I almost did it," he admitted hoarsely. "I almost took it. For a second, I wanted to. I wanted to be strong. To stop feeling like I'm dragging everyone down. His voice dropped to a whisper. What if he's right about me? Hermione shook her head fiercely. No, he's not right. That's exactly how he works. He takes your deepest fears and twists them. You're not weak, Ron. You're not second best. Do you think Harry would trust anyone else to have his back in a fight? Do you think I'd be standing here begging you to talk to me if you didn't matter? Ron blinked rapidly, his chest heaving. But what if I give in, Hermione? What if one day I can't stop myself? Hermione's grip tightened, her eyes blazing with determination. Then we won't let you. I'll be there. Harry will be there. You don't have to fight this alone. For the first time since the nightmare began, Ron felt the crushing weight in his chest ease ever so slightly. He nodded, swallowing hard, his voice raw. I'm scared, Hermione. I know, she whispered. But fear doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. She pulled him into a fierce hug, and after a long, hesitant moment, Ron hugged her back, clinging to the only anchor that kept him from drifting into the darkness. Neither of them noticed Harry standing at the far end of the corridor, frozen just out of sight. He had come looking for them after class, ready to bridge the fragile truce. But what he saw, the closeness, the whispered words, the way Ron seemed to find comfort only in Hermione, sent a complicated storm churning in his chest. Harry turned away before they could see him, his fists clenched at his sides. He wanted to believe it was just friendship, just Hermione being Hermione. But Voldemort's poison worked both ways, and doubt had begun to creep into Harry's heart as well. And far away, Voldemort smiled with quiet satisfaction. Let them cling to one another. It will only sharpen the blade when trust finally breaks. Harry stormed out of the charms corridor, his mind a tangle of thoughts he didn't want to have. He knew he should be relieved. Ron had confided in Hermione, had let her anchor him before Voldemort could drag him further under. That was good. That was what they had all been working toward. So why did it twist like a knife in his chest to see them together like that? All through the afternoon lessons, Harry could barely concentrate. The image replayed itself. Hermione gripping Ron's arm, whispering words only he could hear, Ron burying his face against her shoulder. The raw trust between them had felt like a wall shutting him out. By the time evening fell, Harry's doubts had curdled into something darker. Voldemort had tried to turn Ron against them with lies of betrayal, whispers of being left behind. But what if Ron wasn't the only one vulnerable to poison? What if Voldemort was now trying to twist him? Or worse, what if it wasn't Voldemort at all? What if Ron truly trusted Hermione more than him? That thought burned most of all. Later, in the room of requirement, the DA gathered. Neville and Ginny rearranged cushions, Luna pinned up defensive spell charts, and others chattered in low voices. But Harry stood off to the side, his arms crossed, watching Ron and Hermione as they whispered together in the corner. He knew they were probably discussing what Ron had told her earlier. He knew Hermione would never betray him, that she would come to him with the truth eventually. But reason couldn't quiet the hollow ache in his chest. When the room finally hushed and all eyes turned to him, Harry forced himself to focus. Tonight we're working on shield charms under pressure. Voldemort's forces won't give you a chance to breathe in a fight. You'll have to protect yourself while everything around you is chaos. The DA paired off. Spells cracked and flared, laughter mingled with frustration, and for a while Harry managed to lose himself in the work. But then he caught Ron's eyes across the room. There was something there, a plea, an unspoken apology, and it made Harry's stomach lurch. Ron wanted to mend things. Harry wanted to too. But the shadow of what he'd seen in the corridor clung to him like a curse. When practice ended, Hermione lingered, her brow furrowed as she approached Harry. We need to talk. About Ron. Harry cut her off too quickly. Yeah, I know. He told you everything, didn't he? Hermione blinked, caught off guard. You heard? I saw, Harry said flatly. Earlier. You and him. In the corridor. Her cheeks flushed, but her eyes didn't waver. Harry, it wasn't what you think. I don't know what to think anymore, Harry admitted, his voice low and bitter. Every time Voldemort pushes into one of our heads, he leaves doubt behind. And now I can't tell if it's him making me feel like this, or if it's just me. Hermione's expression softened, the anger she might have shown replaced with something like sorrow. Harry, Ron's terrified. He thinks he's weak, that one day he'll give in. All I did was remind him he isn't alone. That's all. Harry closed his eyes briefly, ashamed of the jealousy twisting inside him. He wanted to believe her, and part of him did. But part of him still saw Ron leaning into her, still heard Voldemort's voice hissing that trust could be broken, that friendship could rot into betrayal. When he opened his eyes again, Hermione was still watching him. "You're not alone either," she said softly. "Don't let him trick you into thinking you are." Harry nodded stiffly, but deep down, he wasn't sure if the words reached him. Across the castle, Ron sat alone in the dormitory, staring at his reflection in the dark window pane. His confession to Hermione had brought relief, but now guilt gnawed at him. He should have told Harry too. He should have let both of them in. But he had chosen the easier path, and somehow, that choice had left all three of them more fractured than before. And far away, Voldemort sat in silence, his thin lips curling. "The seeds grow," he murmured. "Soon the harvest will come." Ron spent most of the night staring at the ceiling of the dormitory, listening to the soft breathing of the others. Sleep never came. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Voldemort's crimson gaze, the gleaming wand, Hermione's arms around him, and Harry's face hard with hurt. By the time dawn streaked the windows with pale light, Ron knew what he had to do. He had to tell Harry everything. After breakfast, Ron found Harry outside near the lake, skipping stones across the water. He looked tired, but calmer than he had been the night before. The sight made Ron's stomach twist. "Harry," Ron began awkwardly, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Can we talk?" Harry didn't look at him, just flicked another stone. "You and Hermione already have your secret talks, don't you?" The jab stung, but Ron swallowed it. "That's why I'm here. I shouldn't have kept it from you. Voldemort, he showed me things. Worse than before. Not just lies. Temptations." That made Harry pause. He turned, his eyes sharp. "What kind of temptations?" Ron exhaled shakily. "He offered me power. Said I could protect everyone if I joined him. Said I'd never be second best again. He even gave me a wand in the dream. And for a second," his voice cracked, "I wanted it. I almost took it." The confession hung between them, raw and heavy. Harry's face tightened, but not with anger. With recognition. "That's exactly how he works," he said quietly. "He showed me once, standing over Dumbledore's body, wand raised. He wanted me to believe I'd do it. To believe I could turn." Ron's head jerked up. "And you didn't?" Harry shook his head. "I nearly did. I nearly believed him. But I remembered something Dumbledore told me. It isn't what he shows you that defines you, it's what you choose after. You didn't take it, Ron. That's what matters." Ron swallowed hard, the weight of the dream pressing less heavily on his chest. "Then why do I still feel like I'm already halfway gone?" Harry stepped closer, his expression fierce. "Because he wants you to feel that way. He wants you broken, doubting, alone. But you're not. You've got me. You've got Hermione. And you've got yourself, even if you can't see it right now." For a long moment, Ron couldn't speak. Then, finally, he gave a short, shaky nod. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I was scared." Harry's voice softened. "I know. But don't shut me out again. We're in this together, all of us or not at all." The tension between them eased at last. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was real. That evening, when the three of them met in the library, Hermione could tell something had shifted. Ron sat closer to Harry, and Harry's gaze held less suspicion. When Ron explained what Voldemort had offered him, Hermione listened in silence, her face pale but resolute. "We'll tell Dumbledore," she said firmly. "He needs to know how far Voldemort is going. But the most important thing is, you didn't take it. That shows strength." Ron looked down at the table, his ears burning. But for the first time in weeks, he didn't feel like a traitor. He felt like maybe he still belonged. Far away, Voldemort felt the bond between them strengthen, and his rage burned white-hot. "They cling to each other like frightened children," he hissed. "Very well. If temptation cannot break them, then fear will." He turned his mind to Harry. It was time the boy who lived felt the blade of doubt as keenly as his friend. Harry drifted into uneasy sleep that night, his scar throbbing faintly as though warning him of what was coming. The moment his eyes closed, he was swept away into Voldemort's world. He stood in the shadow of the Forbidden Forest. The trees stretched like claws against the moonlit sky, and in the clearing ahead, two figures whispered together. Hermione and Ron. At first, Harry felt relief. until their voices carried to him, sharp and undeniable. "We can't keep covering for him, Ron," Hermione said, her face pale but determined. "Harry isn't thinking clearly anymore. Voldemort's gotten inside his head too deeply." Ron's voice was low and tense. "I know. He's slipping. He doesn't even see it, Hermione. He's dangerous." Harry staggered forward, his heart thundering. "That's not true," he shouted, but his voice made no sound. The two of them didn't even glance his way. Hermione stepped closer to Ron, her hand brushing his arm. "If we don't stop him, he'll destroy everything we're fighting for. Maybe Dumbledore was wrong to trust him with so much. Maybe it has to be us who finishes this." Ron's jaw clenched. "Together, then. Just us." The words struck Harry like a curse. He tried to move, to grab their shoulders and make them see, but his legs wouldn't carry him. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own mind. Voldemort's voice slithered through the darkness, cold and triumphant. "You see, Potter? Even now they conspire against you. You are the weapon, the liability, the fool. They will cast you aside when the moment comes, and you will be alone. As you always have been." The scene twisted. Ron and Hermione turned, their faces hard, their wands raised. Not at Voldemort, but at Harry. "Too dangerous," Ron muttered. "Too broken," Hermione whispered. "No!" Harry roared, his magic surging wildly. The world shattered in blinding green light. And he woke with a scream, clutching his scar as pain lanced through his skull. Seamus bolted upright in the next bed, startled. Neville stirred, mumbling something before turning over. Harry forced himself to breathe, but the image of Ron and Hermione's accusing eyes lingered, carved deep into his chest. By morning, the vision gnawed at him like poison. He couldn't meet Ron's gaze in the dormitory, couldn't answer Hermione's questions at breakfast. His throat felt raw, every word stuck behind suspicion and fear. Hermione frowned, studying him closely. "Harry, what's wrong?" "Nothing," he muttered too quickly. Ron frowned. "You sure? You look like you barely slept." Harry forced a nod, but his fists clenched under the table. Were they lying to him? Had Voldemort shown him the truth, or another trick? He wanted to believe in them. He needed to. But Voldemort's laughter still echoed in his ears, and doubt coiled tighter around his heart. Far away, Voldemort leaned back in his chair, his thin lips curling. "At last," he murmured. "The boy who lived begins to question the ones he cannot live without." Hermione watched Harry throughout the morning, her mind whirring with unease. He was quieter than usual, his eyes darting between her and Ron as though he expected something terrible to happen. Whenever she asked him a question, he gave short, clipped answers, refusing to meet her gaze. It wasn't like Harry at all. By the time they reached the library, Hermione couldn't hold her tongue any longer. She tugged him aside before Ron could sit down. "Harry, what's going on? You've been acting strange since last night. Don't tell me it's nothing. I can see it in your face." Harry hesitated, torn between the truth and the fear that voicing it would make it real. I saw something," he muttered. "In my sleep. Or maybe not sleep. It was Voldemort, I think. He showed me something." Hermione's blood ran cold. "Another vision?" she whispered, lowering her voice. "What did you see?" Harry's fists clenched at his sides. His scar still ached, phantom pain threading through his temples. "You and Ron. Talking. About me. You said I was dangerous. That maybe I couldn't be trusted. That you'd stop me if you had to." Hermione's eyes widened, horrified. "Harry, no. I would never say that. You know I wouldn't. Wouldn't you?" Harry snapped, the words harsher than he meant. "I've been inside Voldemort's head, Hermione. You've seen it. You've seen what I do when I lose control. What if you and Ron really are talking about it? What if he's right and I?" "Harry," she cut him off, gripping his arm firmly. "Listen to me. That wasn't real. Voldemort wants you to believe you can't trust us. That's how he wins. He divides us, makes us doubt one another. You cannot let him do that." But Harry's expression was haunted. The conviction in her voice wasn't enough to push the vision away. "It felt real," he whispered. "Like you actually meant it." Before Hermione could answer, Ron returned with an armful of books. He set them down with a thump, grinning. "Got everything we'll need to start planning." "Thought maybe we could." He stopped, noticing the tension crackling between them. "What's wrong?" Hermione looked at Harry, silently urging him to explain. But Harry just shook his head. Nothing. Let's just get on with it. Ron frowned, confused but unwilling to push. He started flipping through the books, but Hermione's mind stayed fixed on Harry's words. She knew Voldemort's tactics, knew how he manipulated through fear and isolation. But this was worse than anything before, because now he was using Harry's deepest fears against him, fears that Hermione had no easy way to erase. That night, as they returned to the common room, Hermione leaned toward Harry. "We'll talk later," she whispered. "Just you and me. Please." Harry didn't answer, but the shadow in his eyes told her everything. Across the castle, in a room cloaked in darkness, Voldemort stood before his gathered followers. His snake-like face glistened in the torchlight as he raised his wand. "It begins," he said softly, almost to himself. "The boy doubts. Soon, he will be mine without a fight." And Bellatrix Lestrange, her laughter sharp as broken glass, hissed, "Then let the traitor's seed grow." Hermione waited until the common room had gone quiet. The fire was low in the grate. Most of the younger students had gone up to bed, and only a few older Gryffindors lingered at the far tables, whispering over homework. Ron had already trudged upstairs, yawning, which left her alone with Harry at last. She moved closer to him on the couch, lowering her voice. "Harry, we need to talk. Please don't shut me out." Harry's jaw tightened, his eyes fixed on the flickering embers. "I told you what I saw. I can't just forget it." "I'm not asking you to forget it," she said firmly. "I'm asking you to see it for what it was. Voldemort wants you to feel isolated, Harry. He knows if you doubt me and Ron, you'll be easier to break. You can't give him that advantage." Harry finally turned to her, his green eyes blazing with hurt and suspicion. "But how do I know you're not hiding things? What if you do think I'm dangerous?" Hermione sucked in a sharp breath, stung. "You are dangerous," she admitted softly. "But not to us. You're dangerous to him. You're the only one who can stand against Voldemort, Harry, and yes, that makes me worry. It scares me every day. But don't you dare believe that I would betray you." Her voice shook, but her gaze was steady. "I've stood by you through everything, trolls, basilisks, dementors, even the ministry itself when no one else believed you. Do you really think I would throw that away now?" Harry's anger faltered. He wanted to believe her, Merlin, he needed to. But the echo of Ron's voice in his dream still gnawed at him. "It wasn't just you," he whispered. "Ron was there too. He said it. He said I wasn't thinking clearly." Hermione hesitated. "Harry, Ron says a lot of things when he's frustrated. Sometimes he doesn't think before he speaks. But he wouldn't abandon you either." "Not really." Harry shook his head, gripping the edge of the couch. "You didn't see him. It was different. It felt true." Hermione reached out and laid her hand over his. "Then we'll prove it false. We'll face him together. But you have to trust me, Harry. If you don't, then Voldemort has already won." Harry stared at her, torn between fear and hope. Slowly, he gave a short nod, though uncertainty still lingered in his eyes. Up in the boys' dormitory, Ron lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't shake the prickle of unease that had followed him all evening. Something was off with Harry, but he didn't know what. Worse, he hadn't missed the way Hermione had pulled Harry aside, whispering to him while leaving Ron out of the loop. The familiar sting of being left behind twisted in his chest. He turned over, muttering to himself. What are they hiding now? Far away, Voldemort smiled, the connection through Harry's scar feeding him every ounce of doubt and tension. He whispered into the void, his voice curling like smoke. "Good, very good. The cracks are forming. Soon, they will not need my hand at all. They will destroy themselves." Ron woke the next morning with the sour taste of resentment still clinging to him. He hadn't slept well, his dreams muddled with half-heard whispers and shadows that seemed to crawl across the dormitory walls. When he came down to the common room, the sight of Hermione and Harry speaking in hushed tones by the fire only deepened the pit in his stomach. "Morning," Ron muttered, forcing his voice to sound casual. Hermione looked up quickly, her expression too bright, too forced. Harry barely glanced at him, muttering a distracted greeting. Ron frowned. They looked like they'd stopped talking the second he walked in. For the rest of the day, the tension followed him like a second shadow. At breakfast, Harry sat next to Hermione, leaning in close when she spoke. In class, she seemed more focused on him than on Ron's attempts at jokes or questions. By the time they filed into defense against the dark arts, Ron felt as though a wall had gone up, shutting him out. Professor Lupin had assigned them to practice advanced shielding charms. Harry and Hermione worked together seamlessly, their spells layering and interweaving. Ron tried to join in, but Harry barely looked at him, and Hermione only gave curt instructions. When Ron's charm faltered, Hermione clicked her tongue impatiently. "You're not concentrating," she said. "Maybe because no one's actually talking to me." Ron snapped before he could stop himself. Heads turned from nearby students, and his ears burned red. Harry frowned. "No one's ignoring you, Ron. Just focus." But to Ron it felt like dismissal. He muttered under his breath, gripping his wand tight enough to make his knuckles ache. That night, Ron found himself wandering the corridors alone. His mind spun with doubts, every look and whisper between Harry and Hermione replaying in his head. It was then he heard it, a voice soft and silken, curling around him like a chill breeze. "They don't need you, Ronald Weasley." Ron froze, heart hammering. He spun, but the corridor was empty. The voice came again, inside his mind this time. "They never did. You've always been the spare, the shadow. Harry has the power, Hermione the brilliance. And you? You are only tolerated. Nothing more." Ron shook his head violently. "Shut up," he whispered. "You're not real." But the voice chuckled low and cruel. "I am as real as the doubt in your heart. Look at them. Whispering secrets you're not allowed to hear. Do you truly believe they trust you? Do you truly believe she, Hermione, sees you as anything more than a burden?" Ron's breath caught. The insecurities he had always buried threatened to spill over. "That's not true," he muttered, but his voice wavered. "It is true," the voice hissed. "But I can give you strength. I can give you worth. While they conspire in shadows, you could step into the light. You could be more than the forgotten Weasley." Ron clutched his wand, trembling. He wanted to run, to scream, to silence the poisonous whisper. But deep inside, part of him listened. The next morning, when Ron rejoined Harry and Hermione, his smile was strained, his eyes shadowed. Harry didn't notice. He was too busy battling the doubts of his own vision. Hermione did notice, though, her sharp eyes catching the flicker of unease in Ron's expression. Something was happening to all three of them, and Hermione feared that if she didn't act soon, Voldemort wouldn't need to fight them at all. They would tear themselves apart. Hermione sat in the library, surrounded by open books she wasn't reading. Her quill hovered above the parchment, but no words came. Her mind was on Harry and Ron, and the invisible chasm that seemed to widen every day. Harry had grown more withdrawn since his vision. He still tried to smile when she spoke to him, still acted as if everything was fine, but his eyes told a different story. Doubt gnawed at him, pulling him away even as she tried to tether him back. Ron, meanwhile, was changing in quieter ways. He laughed less. He snapped more. And sometimes, when he thought no one was looking, his expression hardened in a way that made Hermione's stomach twist. She knew Voldemort was behind it. He was pulling at their fears, twisting their insecurities like threads in a cruel tapestry. But knowing wasn't enough. If she didn't act soon, the three of them, the trio that had always been unbreakable, would fracture beyond repair. Hermione slammed her book shut and stood abruptly. She found Harry by the window in the common room, staring out at the grounds as though expecting answers to appear in the snow. "Harry, we need to talk," she said firmly. He didn't turn. "About what?" "About you. About Ron. About all of us," she pressed. "Something is happening, and if we don't face it, we'll fall apart. Voldemort wants that." Harry's shoulders stiffened. "You think I don't know that? He's already in my head, Hermione. I can't tell what's real anymore." Hermione softened her tone, stepping closer. "Then let me be the voice you can trust. You've always trusted me." For a flicker of a moment, Harry looked at her, and the weight in his eyes nearly broke her. But before he could answer, Ron came through the portrait hole. He froze when he saw them standing close together, Hermione's hand hovering near Harry's arm. His jaw tightened. "What's this, then?" Ron asked, his voice laced with bitterness. "Another little secret meeting? Didn't realize I wasn't invited." "Ron, it's not like that," Hermione began. But Ron cut her off, his voice rising. "Isn't it? Because lately, it seems like I'm always the one left out. You two whispering, making plans, keeping things from me. What am I then? Just the tag-along." Harry opened his mouth, but Ron didn't give him the chance. You think I don't notice? The way you look at each other, the way you close off the second I walk in? You don't trust me anymore. Admit it. Hermione's chest tightened. That's not true. We do trust you, Ron. But Voldemort is trying to make us turn against each other. Can't you see? This is what he wants. Ron's eyes burned, his face flushed with anger. Or maybe it's just the truth. Maybe I was never really part of this in the first place. Just Harry and Hermione, the chosen and the clever one, with me trailing behind. He stormed past them before either could stop him, disappearing up the stairs. Harry stood frozen, guilt churning in his gut. He's right, isn't he? I've pushed him out without even meaning to. Hermione placed a hand on his arm. No, that's Voldemort speaking through him. We can still fix this. We have to. But even as she said it, a sickening fear settled in her chest. Because the look in Ron's eyes hadn't just been doubt. It had been temptation. And somewhere beyond the castle walls, Voldemort smiled. The seeds of betrayal were sprouting exactly as he had planned. The air in Gryffindor Tower felt heavy, suffocating. For days Ron avoided both Harry and Hermione, speaking only when necessary, and even then with clipped, cold words. He came back late from patrols, skipped meals with them, and kept his distance in classes. It was as though the golden thread that had bound the trio together for years was unraveling thread by thread. Hermione tried to reach him, but every attempt ended in silence or bitterness. Harry too wanted to fix things, but doubt still gnawed at him after Voldemort's vision. Each time Ron's voice rose in anger or Hermione's in pleading, he felt the echo of that dream pressing against his skull. The breaking point came on a bitterly cold night in January. The castle was quiet, the corridors echoing with the sound of the wind outside. Harry had fallen asleep in an armchair near the dying fire, the weight of exhaustion finally overcoming him. Hermione was still awake, poring over books, trying desperately to find anything that might help them withstand Voldemort's influence. Ron entered the common room quietly, his face pale and drawn. He carried something hidden beneath his cloak, and his eyes flicked toward Harry before settling on Hermione. She looked up, startled. "Ron, where have you been?" Ron didn't answer at first. He pulled the object from his cloak. It was a mirror, its surface dark and clouded, pulsing faintly with magic that made Hermione's skin crawl. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. Ron's voice was low and bitter. "He gave it to me. Said it would show me the truth. Said it would prove what I've always known, that I don't matter. Not to you. Not to him." Hermione's heart sank. Voldemort. He had managed to reach Ron, to put something tangible in his hands. She stood slowly, her voice steady though her insides trembled. "Ron, that's not true. You matter more than you know. He's twisting you, feeding on your fears." But Ron's hand tightened on the mirror, and for a moment she saw the reflection within it. Harry and Hermione standing together, smiling at each other, while Ron stood apart, forgotten. The image was cruelly sharp, playing directly on every wound Ron carried. Tears burned Hermione's eyes. "That's a lie, Ron. Don't let him win. You're our friend, our family. Nothing he shows you changes that." Harry stirred, woken by the sharp edge in their voices. He sat up groggily, his eyes falling on Ron and the mirror. His scar flared instantly, and Voldemort's presence surged into his mind, dark and gleeful. "Yes, Potter," the voice hissed. "Watch him betray you. Watch the one you call brother prove where his loyalties lie." Harry stood, his wand raised, though his hands shook. "Ron, don't do this." For a long, agonizing moment, Ron wavered. His eyes flicked between the mirror, Hermione's pleading face, and Harry's trembling stance. The weight of years, friendship, laughter, battles fought side by side, pulled against the venomous whispers filling his head. Finally, with a strangled cry, Ron hurled the mirror into the fireplace. The glass shattered, flames swallowing it whole. A scream echoed through the common room. Not Ron's, not Harry's, not Hermione's, but Voldemort's, furious and cut short as the connection snapped. Ron collapsed into a chair, shaking violently, his face buried in his hands. I nearly. Hermione knelt beside him, her arms wrapping around his shoulders. "But you didn't. You're still here. That's what matters." Harry, chest heaving, lowered his wand. His scar still burned, but the crushing weight of doubt lifted slightly. He saw Ron clearly for the first time in weeks. Not as a rival, not as a threat, but as his friend, battered by fears but still fighting. For the first time since Voldemort had begun sowing his poison, the trio sat together again. Broken, shaken, but united. Hermione's voice was quiet, but resolute. He tried to break us. He nearly did. But if we stand together, if we hold on to each other no matter what he throws at us, he cannot win. Harry nodded slowly, meeting Ron's eyes. Together. Always. Ron swallowed hard, guilt still etched into his face, but he managed a small nod. Together. Outside, the storm raged on, but within Gryffindor Tower, the fire flared brighter. Voldemort's shadow still loomed over them, darker than ever. But for now their bond had held. And that was a victory the Dark Lord had not expected.